Well, the GOP race may have moved on to Florida, but there is a voting controversy that's going on now in South Carolina that's catching a bit of attention. The Palmetto State's Attorney General saying more than 900 of the voters in the recent elections were actually dead people. And you might wonder, how do those dead people find their way to the polls? That's what we're wondering.
We are transferring power from Washington, D.C., and giving it back to you, the people.
Gotham is yours, and we give it back to you. The people.
The people.
I like China. I sell apartment for I just sold an apartment for $15 million to somebody from China. Am I supposed to dislike them? I own a big chunk of the Bank of America building in 1290 Avenue of the Americas that I got from China in a war. Very valuable. I love China. The biggest bank in the world is from China. You know where their United States headquarters is located? In this building, in Trump Tower. I love China. People say, oh, you don't like China. No, I love them. But their leaders are much smarter than our leaders. And we can't sustain ourselves with that. There's too much. It's like take the New England Patriots and Tom Brady and have them play your high school football team. That's the difference between China's leaders and our leaders. They are ripping us. We are rebuilding China. We're rebuilding many countries. China, you go there now, roads, bridges, schools, you never saw anything like it. They have bridges that make the George Washington Bridge look like small potatoes. And they're all over the place. We have all the cards, but we don't know how to use them. We don't even know that we have the cards because our leaders don't understand the game. We could turn off that spigot by charging them tax until they behave properly. Let's say China. 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 You go over to China. 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 You take China. 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 I love them. China. 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 I have to have my China. China. China because China. 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 China now. China. China. You know, China. I know China very well. China. 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 China.
Northwest Wisconsin, where I'm from.
It's China to me. China. China, 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 China. You want to buy from China? That's great. Buy from China. Buy toys from China. China in particular. China. China. I have people that I know in China. 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 China, 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 China. I've been saying China. China, 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 China.
Let me ask you about China.
China. I go to China. 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 People from China, they love me. Right. China. 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 In China, they say I don't like China. I love China. People think I don't like China. I love China. China. China is the new China, by the way. China. 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 I deal with China. 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 Big league China. So don't tell me about China. I know China. 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 Whether it's China, China. So if you went to China and you wanted to get a job in China, I don't knock China. How could I dislike China? The man from China. China. You have China. Carl, take China. 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 China's over here. Look at what China's doing. They're learning from China. 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 Okay? Look at that. Isn't that nice? China. 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 China, 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 China. And by the way, I love China.
I mean, I love China. How can you not love China? I love China. China, China. China, China. China, China. China, 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 China.
And you know China, 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 South China, China, China. People say, oh, you don't like China. I like China. China. I love China. China. China all the time. China. When was the last time you heard China?
President Trump slapping $50 billion worth of tariffs on Chinese imports. That number initially worked out by the U.S. Trade Representative, but that number may indeed rise. We're going to get a list of the products, but take a listen to the president.
This is the first of many. This is number one, but this is the first of many.
Well, there you go. 1,300 units, they say. That could include products, it could include restrictions on investment and so on. We'll be getting that list in the next couple of weeks. American Apparel and Footwear Association CEO Rick Heffenbein joins us now. All right, Rick, from what I see, your organization, the American Apparel and Footwear Association, you represent more than, well, 1,000 name brands, an industry that supports 4 million U.S. jobs. What the president signed today, what could it do to your industry?
Well, if it's a hit on our industry, it's a hit on the American consumer. It would be devastating for us. You know, right now, apparel and footwear, believe it or not, we've already paid 51% of all tariffs collected in this country, yet we represent only 6% of imports. We are really hoping that we are not on this list. We do like the idea that the president is going after intellectual property. That's really, really important for us, but we don't want more tariffs. There's no future in raising the price to the American consumer. It's just not something that's going to work.
But, Rick, you know, here in New York City, I can go down to Chinatown and get knockoffs of all your famous brands for a fraction of the price, you know. You certainly, why wouldn't you want China targeted in this fashion in order to level the playing field and with regard to intellectual property to make sure that your products are not being knocked off?
The problem is, I agree with your premise. We do want China to stop doing this. Our whole industry is passionate about China stopping doing this. The problem is, this is not the right method. We're not doing the right thing. This will not stop China. There are other ways to stop China. This isn't going to do it. All this is going to do is raise prices in America. And the Dow, if the Dow is allowed to vote, you can see what their vote is today. They're voting they don't like this. There could be retaliation. There could be problems in terms of what's going to be sold, who's going to buy it, where we're going to buy it, how do you move industries out of China. You can't imagine what this unleashes. This is just not the right solution to the problem.
But, Rick, you know, we've been in a trade war with China for many years. We haven't exactly fired back up to this point. You say there are many other things we can do. Well, why haven't we done them?
Well, let's go back to things we've done. We've had 3 salvos at China. You go back to 1930, Smoot-Hawley. You know, that was, a lot of people say, what precipitated the Great Depression. Heaven forbid that should happen again. And that was the imposition of tariffs, many of which are still in effect today. The second thing was 2002, when President Bush launched a 3-year 30% tax on steel. Lasted 1 year. Didn't work. The third thing was President Obama, 35% on tires. That didn't work. Matter of fact, it didn't work so much, it cost $900,000 per every job they saved. Trade wars don't work. It's a bad deal. It's a silly thing to do. It's not going to help anybody. There's other things that can be done. This is the wrong approach.
Could it be a prelude, though, to a negotiation? We know that's the president's style. You kind of shoot for the moon and then find some common ground somewhere in between. I'm assuming that's what you're hopeful for.
Yeah, look, we are pleased with one thing. The president has brought this front and center. People are going to talk about it. Hopefully we're going to do something about it. They're using a logical progression here. In less than 15 days, we'll know what's on the list. In 30 days, we'll be able to have open hearings on it. These are good things. And the president did a good thing. He brought it out front. Right. Now let's talk about it. Let's not issue tariffs.
Right. Well, let's see how this whole thing develops. Rick Heffenbein, the American Apparel and Footwear Association. Thanks so much for joining us today, Rick. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
President Trump promised today that even though he may be starting a trade war with China, American farmers would come out ahead.
If during the course of a negotiation they want to hit the farmers because they think that hits me, we'll make it up to them. And in the end, they're going to be much stronger than they are right now.
But growers like Steve Frick...
Come on. Come on, let's go show cows.
...who runs a small farm in Illinois and serves as president of the local county farm bureau, are already feeling the pain.
We're about half done with what we have for calving, and we have about 10 more that'll have babies here pretty soon.
So is this all your farm, like everything I can see right now?
Oh, almost everything you can see. There's a little bit over there that belongs to the neighbor. We grow corn, soybeans, wheat, and a little bit of hay to feed the cows. We've made our plans for the year, and now here in one day they changed our whole plan. It's only saber rattling at this point, but it's already taken some effect.
Because even though the tariff hasn't been imposed.
Right.
Yeah.
And so no, there's nothing we can do about that. This year was supposed to be the first time in about 35 years that the United States has grown more soybeans than corn because there was more money in soybeans. Right now, for the state of Illinois, we took about $200 million out of farmers' pockets with this drop in price since the tariff was announced.
While his gross income should be about $240,000, Frick said the proposed tariffs will knock off about 20% of that. But his expenses, as much as $180,000 a year, won't change. The bottom line? Frick usually nets at least $60,000. This year, he expects to make a fraction of that.
Can you do anything to fix that? I mean, to make up the money? Or are you just taking a hit?
We will take a hit. As we look at that field, we just needed how many dollars of loss is that going to be for us for this fall? We still have to plant it because we still have to have something come in. We just know that we're not going to come out ahead.
So you're a Republican and you supported Donald Trump in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you support him?
I think the biggest reason that I supported him is because I still believe in individual responsibility and smaller government. It was interesting to see how the economy of the country has changed in this short time since this election has taken place. We're glad to see America get stronger.
You've got to be a little bit disappointed, though, that sort of change in positive growth comes at your expense.
It does, and that is difficult. Agriculture kind of sometimes is at odds with some of the economy in our country, so we knew that we were going to have to pay some price. We just didn't want to pay the whole price.
I have to say it sounds a little bit like President Trump sort of left farmers behind.
Well, that's a little bit how we're feeling. Us farmers, we're resilient. We'll make it work some way. We've done that for a long time. I don't want to say that I don't support the Republican Party right now or President Trump, but there's some of these issues I'd sure like to see different.
Вот эти вбросы – это очевидная фальшивка. Трамп, когда приезжал в Москву, даже не помню, когда он приезжал, несколько лет назад, он ведь не был никаким политическим деятелем. Мы даже не знали о его политических амбициях. Он просто бизнесмен, один из богатых людей Америки. Что кто-то думает, что у нас спецслужбы гоняются за каждым американским миллиардером, что ли? Да, конечно, нет. Это просто полный бред. Трамп приехал и тут же побежал встречаться с московскими проститутками. Это человек, во-первых, взрослый уже, да? А во-вторых, человек, который не всю жизнь, но многие годы занимался организацией конкурсов красоты, общался с самыми красивыми женщинами мира. Знаете, я с трудом могу такое представить, что он побежал в отель встречаться с нашими девушками с пониженной социальной ответственностью. Хотя они, безусловно, и они у меня самые лучшие в мире, безусловно. Но сомневаюсь, что Трамп клюнул на это.
Even more breaking news tonight. The Wall Street Journal reporting that a lawyer for President Trump arranged a hefty payment to an adult film star. Why? Because of an alleged sexual affair. Tom Foreman joins us with more now.
Hey, Jim, this is a big new claim in the Wall Street Journal. A woman was paid $130,000 a month before the election to keep quiet about a sexual encounter with Donald Trump. I say a month before the election, $130,000. According to this story, Trump had this encounter with an adult film star who goes by the name Stormy Daniels in 2006 at a celebrity golf tournament. The Journal says this new report of hush money comes from people familiar with the matter. But the president's longtime lawyer, Michael Cohen, is hitting back hard, saying,
"It doesn't get much more tawdry than this."
He's like, wow, you are special. You remind me of my daughter.
Stephanie Clifford, a porn star who goes by the stage name Stormy Daniels, sitting down with Anderson Cooper on 60 Minutes for a blockbuster interview, defying a temporary restraining order from an arbitrator to dish about her alleged affair with Donald Trump at a celebrity golf tournament back in 2006.
Did you want to have sex with him?
No, but I didn't say no. I'm not a victim. I'm not.
It was entirely consensual.
Oh, yes. Yes.
How does your client feel today now that she's finally told her story?
Well, she's certainly pleased that I think the American people gained some insight into her as a person and also had an opportunity really for the first time to gauge her credibility.
Today, Nightline sat down with Stormy Daniels' lawyer, Michael Avenatti, who's been taunting the president with tweets all weekend long. How do you feel she did?
I thought she was exceptional. I mean, I think that people came to that interview with a lot of preconceived notions, as I did, admittedly, before I met her the first time, about who she was. And I think she blew a lot of that out of the water last night.
But at the White House, a very different view.
With respect to that interview, I will say the president strongly, clearly, and has consistently denied these underlying claims.
And from Mar-a-Lago, silence. The president and First Lady arrived there together Friday evening, but the president returned to Washington alone Sunday night. Melania Trump chose to stay on in Florida with the couple's son for spring break. Today, this tweet from the First Lady's spokeswoman. While I know the media is enjoying speculation and salacious gossip, I'd like to remind people there's a minor child whose name should be kept out of news stories when at all possible. That child less than 6 months old when the alleged affair took place.
Did he mention his wife or child at all in this?
I asked, and he brushed it aside, said, oh, yeah, you know, don't worry about that. We have separate rooms and stuff.
For the president, already facing massive protests from women, these allegations aren't likely to endear him to women voters in the midterms.
Voters are embarrassed by all of this. They don't want to hear about it, but they do expect accountability. If a law was broken, they expect the lawbreaker to be punished, to be held accountable. And if that doesn't happen, then voters will do it themselves on Election Day.
That said, longtime Republican pollster Frank Luntz believes the political fallout for Trump will be minimal.
I don't see this instance as having a significant impact or even a measurable impact on Donald Trump's favorability or on his credibility. People have essentially made up their minds.
At the time of the alleged affair, Trump was also allegedly cheating with a Playboy bunny. Karen McDougal sat down with Anderson Cooper on CNN last week.
Did he ever use protection?
No. No, he didn't.
Last month, in response to a New Yorker article, a White House spokesperson said Trump denies having had an affair with McDougal. But the two women's stories have some eerie similarities, including that comparison with Trump's daughter, Ivanka.
He said I was beautiful like her, and, you know, you're a smart girl.
McDougal claims her affair lasted 10 months. Daniels says hers was a one-night stand. The president's lawyer, Michael Cohen, has admitted to paying Daniels $130,000 in the closing days of the 2016 presidential campaign.
The question becomes, why then? Why suddenly, days before the election, did he decide, you know what, I'm going to pay this woman $130,000 just because?
Cohen insists neither the president nor the Trump Organization was aware of that transaction or the non-disclosure agreement Daniels signed.
This whole idea that there's some separation between the Trump Organization and Mr. Cohen personally in connection with this is a bunch of nonsense.
And why is that significant?
Well, it's very significant because there are some serious questions being raised as to whether this conduct constitutes violations of campaign finance law.
Common Cause has filed complaints with the Federal Elections Commission and the Department of Justice.
This is a serious issue because Americans have a right to know who's spending money to influence their elections.
The president has yet to comment publicly on Daniels' allegations. His friend, ABC News contributor Chris Ruddy, spoke with Trump this weekend.
He said he thought that much of the Stormy Daniels stuff was a political hoax.
I mean, it's understandable why the president of the United States wouldn't deign to answer the allegations of a porn star.
I mean, why is that? I mean, I don't understand that. Bill Clinton answered the allegations.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky.
Didn't work out so well for him, did it?
Well, because he wasn't honest about it. I have been consistent in this. This is about the cover-up. This is about a search for the truth.
Why reopen all this if she was happy enough to sign the confidentiality agreement?
She didn't start this. They reopened it. But the president doesn't have the gumption to face the tough question and answer it? This president?
You're taunting him now.
I'm not taunting him. I'm stating a fact.
Avenatti has taunted Trump with this cryptic photo, a computer disk in a safe, and the warning, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, how many words is this worth? What can you tell me about what's on that disk?
Well, I'm not prepared to tell you anything about what's on that disk.
Is that the blue dress?
The DVD? Well, you know, I don't know. It could be. It might be.
Perhaps the most chilling allegation Daniels makes is that in 2011, after she'd sold her story to a tabloid, an unknown man approached her and her daughter in a Las Vegas parking lot.
A guy walked up on me and said to me, "Leave Trump alone, forget the story." And then he leaned around and looked at my daughter and said, "A beautiful little girl, it'd be a shame if something happened to her mom." And then he was gone.
Avenatti admits he has no evidence the alleged thug was connected with Michael Cohen or Donald Trump. Michael Cohen's attorney sent Daniels a cease and desist letter questioning whether the incident ever happened, denying any connection to it, and demanding a retraction and an apology. Your response?
It's not even worth the paper that's printed on.
Now the president and his lawyer are threatening Daniels with financial ruin for breaking the confidentiality agreement. The issue, whether the confidentiality agreement is enforceable because Trump himself never signed it, to be decided by federal court.
Stormy Daniels' legal team is making a lot of arguments to get out of this agreement. None of them are that strong.
Today, Daniels amended her suit to accuse Cohen of defamation and violation of campaign finance laws.
He knows I'm telling the truth.
President Trump embroiled in a scandal that may not bring down his presidency, but certainly would seem to taint it. I'm David Wright for Nightline in New York.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.
Did you have a sexual relationship with Donald Trump?
She's the woman whose name is splashed across headlines all over the world. Now, Inside Edition sits down exclusively with Stormy Daniels, who, according to the Wall Street Journal, was paid $130,000 to keep silent about an alleged affair she had with Donald Trump in 2006.
Did you have a sexual relationship with Donald Trump? You can't answer that. Did you have any relationship with Donald Trump?
Well, I think it's common, by looking at photos that I've met him.
She did enjoy being spoofed on Saturday Night Live.
Saturday Night Live is my favorite show of all time.
And you were portrayed on the news.
Right.
What was that like?
Terrifying.
Why?
Because I love SNL, and I have a little crush on him, on Colin.
Oh, well, there you go.
And so if he said something really mean about me,
How did you feel about your portrayal on that show?
Did I giggle? Yes.
Tune in to Inside Edition to see more of how Stormy Daniels responded to questions about President Donald Trump.
We have on the one side, we've got the president's attorneys and the president with their 3 stories. Sarah Sanders has her own version. You mix them all up, maybe they come up with one. You've got on the other side Stormy Daniels, who was on Saturday Night Live last night, staying in front of the cameras, now a pop culture feature herself. Let's watch a portion of that performance.
Stormy, this is Michael Cohen. Are you alone?
Yes.
And what are you wearing?
Excuse me?
Okay, Michael, I can take it from here. Okay, but as your attorney, I highly advise against you. So what up, girl?
Hello, Donald.
Come on, Stormy, stop making such a big deal about this. Everyone knows it's just an act.
I work in adult films. We're not really known for our acting.
Just tell me, what do you need for this to all go away?
A resignation?
Yeah, right. Being president is like doing porn. Once you do it, it's hard to do anything else.
So, Brian, it appears that the American people are not punishing the president for the actual alleged affair. So what's the impact of Stormy Daniels being on television, on SNL? Is she having some impact here?
Well, she's become one of the most effective thorns in his side. When you think about some of the top opponents to Trump that get a lot of attention, there's some lawmakers, but it's actually people like Stormy Daniels and Michael Avenatti. Go figure, who thought we would have been here 60 months into the Trump presidency. I think what Rudy said, though, about the Stormy Daniels payment just doesn't add up. He said last night, this payment would have been made whether Trump was running for president or not. But we all know this alleged affair happened more than a decade ago, and it was because Stormy Daniels was getting calls from media outlets and thinking about speaking out only a couple weeks before the campaign ended that she was paid at that time. So the idea that this would have happened, this payment would have been made regardless of the campaign, it just doesn't make sense. And if I can add one more point about Rudy.
Yeah.
It's Stormy Daniels. Yeah, it's a sex scandal. It's a payment scandal. Fine. Rudy's also out there on national television talking about the Americans that are being held in North Korea. He has said repeatedly they're about to be released. On Thursday, he said they're being released today. And then they haven't been released yet, according to the U.S. government. Again, last night, he said hopefully soon. Why is the president's personal lawyer on national television talking about a really critical, delicate national security matter? It just boggles the mind.
This was a conversation we had in the last hour. What's his job description? I mean, he was wrong, obviously, on Thursday saying that the detainees would be released.
Today. Now, hopefully he'll be right this time, but God forbid this make the delicate situation any worse.
And Mark, let me come to you for one final one and pick up what Brian said there. From the show last night, Giuliani went on to say, even if this was a campaign donation, the president reimbursed it fully with a payment of $35,000 a month to pay off that and other expenses. And he says that wouldn't be a violation either. Is that accurate?
Well, I think Rudy's just past his prime, quite honestly, and taking on the massive amount of information he had to absorb, he should have hushed up. He had an opportunity to sort of come on scene, maybe, and be a reasoned voice. What he said last night, to me, was more problematic. He came out and sort of doubled down and said, again, what he did, he would have done anyway. Incredibly untrue and coincidental if it was true. And then he said it was for this reason. It wasn't a campaign reason. It was a campaign reason. It was a retainer. I take retainers. You don't take retainers for other purposes and then come in afterwards and sort of sweep them all together and say, now it makes sense. You don't have an opportunity to do that. And my God, you never go on national TV and discuss that type of information as a lawyer.
previously talked about the phase of Nazism, that humanity somehow has to go through it. We're approaching very quickly. Bala Sulam says that if we won't correct the situation, raise it to the level of connection by light, then the connection will come through Nazism. Nazism, it's also connection. They're for connection, but connecting those against these, because there isn't the power in humanity to connect, meaning they feel that they have to be connected, that in the connection between them there's a kind of a savior and transcension, and it's true, only they can't transcend and save themselves if it's not through hate towards someone else. There's no reason to connect otherwise. There has to be a reason against whom, against what to connect. There has to be a clear, evident enemy, one that you hate, that connects us together. That's how it works in the ego. Otherwise, the ego, it doesn't find the need for it.
Look, Putin, from everything I see, has no respect for this person.
Well, that's because he'd rather have a puppet as president of the United States.
No puppet.
And it's pretty clear.
You're the puppet.
It's pretty clear you won't admit that the Russians have engaged in cyber attacks against the United States of America, that you encouraged espionage against our people, that you are willing to spout the Putin line.
It was the great Thomas Jefferson who said, "The God who gave us life gave us liberty." Jefferson asked, can the liberties of a nation be secure when we have removed a conviction that these liberties are the gift of God? Among those freedoms is the right to worship according to our own beliefs. That is why I will get rid of and totally destroy the Johnson Amendment and allow our representatives of faith to speak freely and without fear of retribution. I will do that, remember. Just as I promised, we are allowing our local police to access surplus military equipment, something the previous administration, for some reason, refused to do. Explain that one. Explain it to me, please. Never understood that one. Somebody out there can explain. Anybody want to stand up and explain it? It'd be tough. And that's something that Nazi Germany would have done and did do. Of corruption. Funny how that term caught on, isn't it? I tell everyone, I hated it. Somebody said, drain the swamp. I said, oh, that's so hokey. That is so terrible. I said, all right, I'll try it. So like a month ago, I said, drain the swamp. The place went crazy. I said, whoa, what's this? Then I said it again. Then I started saying it like I meant it, right? And then I said it, I started loving it. And the place loved it. It's drain the swamp. I mean, it's true. It's true.
I mean, people have said that Jeb Bush, you know, he's low energy. People have said that if I didn't run, that thing would have been over already. He would have had it. Why? For what reason? I mean, I don't know why, but they say he would have had it. He's gone, so he's down to 2%. Benefit of the doubt. Because, you know, it's ABC, and she practically owns ABC. She really does. I mean, George Stephanopoulos interviewed me the other day. It was terrible. It was like, it was one of the great interviews. Did anybody see that interview? But, you know,
hey, Jews were arrested on 9/11, Trump! Hey, Trump! Jews! Hey, listen to me, Trump! Jews were arrested on 9/11 in New Jersey, not Muslims! Jews! 5 Jews, you got it? 5 Jews, Charles! Hey, let's go with me, dude! Hey, 5 Jews, Donald! Dancing Israelis! Israel did 9/11!
Okay.
Hey, Israel did 9/11, all right?
Okay, sit down. Relax.
Dancing Israelis! You're a Zionist!
He's on our side.
You're a Zionist, Donald! Donald!
So, I look forward to running against Hillary. We're going to beat her. You know what happened? I backed John McCain. He lost.
Oh, man,
and that was a tough one in all fairness because
turn it on first.
I would say things weren't exactly going
There
right.
you go. You ain't never done.
Just let it go.
But
Right?
he lost.
Let him be.
And then I backed Mitt Romney.
Just let him be.
He should have supported. That was
Learn about
right there. He had a failed president.
All right.
Bye-bye.
I'm getting thrown out of a Trump rally for talking about Israel. Donald said it was okay. Donald said I could stay, but whoa, whoa, whoa. No, no!
You know, it's ABC, and she practically owns ABC. She really does. I mean, George Stephanopoulos interviewed me the other day. It was terrible. It was like, it was one of the greatest. Did anybody see that interview?
The Jews were arrested on 9/11, Trump. Hey, Trump. Jews, hey, listen to me, Trump. Jews were arrested on 9/11 in New Jersey. Not my Jews. 5 Jews, you got it? 5 Jews, Donald. Hey, come on, man. Hey, 5 Jews, Donald. That's okay. You up to Israel did 9/11. Hey, Israel did 9/11, all right? Dancing and burning. They're Zionists. They're Zionists, Donald. Donald.
So, I look forward to I backed John McCain, he lost. And that was a tough one in all fairness. I would say things weren't exactly going great.
Just let it go.
But
Right?
he lost.
Let him be.
And then I backed Mitt Romney.
Just let him be.
That was we had a failed president.
All right.
And that was the
I'm getting thrown out of a church area for talking about Israel. Donald said I could stay, but no! I'm not going to fucking tell you that. I will let it go. Okay. Let it go. I will. Okay. Let it go. Okay. I don't know. Please. I'm not going to tell you that. Okay.
Get your camera back.
Okay. It's expensive. That's my fault. Well, I don't think I'm done. I'm Catholic. Turn my camera to here, about to That's it.
All right.
And we have kids that are watching the internet, and they want to be masterminds. And then you wonder, why do we lose all these kids? They go over there, they're young, they're impressionable. They go over, they want to join ISIS. We're losing a lot of people because of the internet. And we have to do something. We have to go see Bill Gates and a lot of different people that really understand what's happening. We have to talk to them, maybe in certain areas, closing that internet up in some way. Somebody will say, oh, freedom of speech, freedom of speech. These are foolish people. We have a lot of foolish people. We have a lot of foolish people. We've got to maybe do something with the internet because they are recruiting by the thousands.
We have been fighting alongside al-Qaeda, fighting alongside ISIS. ISIS is now emboldened in 2 countries. But here's the anomaly. We're with ISIS in Syria. We're on the same side of the war.
Look, ISIS got started through funding from our friends and allies, because as people will tell you in the region, if you want somebody who will fight to the death against Hezbollah, you don't put out a recruiting poster and say, you know, sign up for us, we're going to make a better world. You go after zealots and you go after these religious fundamentalists. That's who fights Hezbollah.
And for you to lose that war was pretty significant. And I don't know if you perceive it as a loss, but it certainly was a shift of perception by the rest of the world. Did you perceive that as less than stellar?
It certainly wasn't a victory. I think I think basically the war was not won because we lacked a strategy, and the strategy is a very simple one. We faced about 5,000 Hezbollah, which are really Iranian forward infantry with missiles. When you, in a war, in order to win, you take overwhelming force with firepower and mobility. You move very quickly at the enemy's weakest point. That's basically how you win wars. And in our case, we went with almost the same number of troops against right into their gun sights. Not smart. We should have come from the behind, if you will, with 10 times the force. Not smart. We should have come from the behind, if you will, with 10 times the force.
All right, guys, so I'm about to go out and run some errands here in my city of Miami. But I'm going to do it wearing my good old Donald Trump, finally someone with balls t-shirt.
Now, I have two comments on my deep respect for human life, okay? Number one, I'm opposed to our wasting our military in the Middle East on behalf of Zionist Israel. Thank you.
Okay. All right, well, let me just tell you that Israel is a very, very important ally of the United States, and we are going to protect them 100%. 100%. They've been our most reliable. It's our true friend over there, and we're going to protect Israel 100%.
Still betrayed by our government and for the cover-up, and the Israeli government for covering it up.
Before Israeli commandos shot 9 peace activists to death aboard the Mavi Marmara, 34 American military men were killed by Israeli jet fighter planes. It happened in 1967 during the Six-Day War, and it became an event these men and women would live with for the rest of their lives.
It's not anger, it's sadness, great sadness that not only a close ally deliberately attacked this ship, but that the United States kind of sat by and allowed it to happen.
Prepared to abandon ship. We couldn't even open the hatch up because they were shooting at us so bad. There was no place to go. They shot the life rafts. If we had to go into the water, there would have probably been no survivors.
Jim Smith was aboard the Liberty when it was bombed for over 2 hours by the Israeli Air Force.
The Israelis claimed it was a mistaken identity, and the United States government bought that explanation. I'm saying a mistaken identity does not allow you sufficient time to shoot all the antennas, to shoot the 4 gun tubs that we had, and to strafe the bridge. If it's a mistaken identity, then you don't know what you're looking at.
As the years drag on, the anniversary never gets any easier.
There's nothing, medicine, booze, nothing takes it away. It's just something you have to live with.
The tale of the USS Liberty became a story of courage and betrayal, a gaping wound eating away at the survivors. As another year passes by without a congressional investigation, the survivors wonder if justice will ever come their way, hoping with uncertainty that one day Israel will face harsh penalties for killing American citizens in an event many claim was a cover-up.
And 51% of those polled agreed that Muslims in America should have the choice of being governed according to Sharia. You know what Sharia is? 51%. It's going to get worse and worse. You're going to have more World Trade Centers. It's going to get worse and worse, folks. We can be politically correct and we can be stupid, but it's going to get worse and worse.
I remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. And I said, you know, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse. And that's one of the sacrifices we have to make. I said, let's make it, and let's get on with it. And so, next thing you know, we've got the designs of a building. And the first design meeting was in April of 2000. And construction began shortly thereafter in 2002.
What we need to stand up and say is not only did they attack the USS Liberty, they did 9/11. They did it. 9/11 has led directly to 60,000 Americans dead and wounded. God knows how many hundreds of thousands of people in other countries that we've killed or wounded or made homeless. This is an open wound. And what Americans need to understand is they did it. They did it. And if they do understand that, Israel's going to disappear. Israel will flat-ass disappear from this earth. I sent a film to one of my colleagues, and it basically had Americans grieving over their dead, coming back. And I showed one of them, it was a woman just wrenched by grief, you know, over her dead soldier. And I said, you know, if Americans ever know that Israel did this, they're going to scrub them off the earth. And they're not going to give a rat's ass what the cost is. They are not going to care.
We have two threats. One of them, you're quite right, we focus on is beyond the horizon in the form of these rogue regimes like Iraq or Iran that are feverishly arming themselves with ballistic weapon missiles or unconventional weapons, biological or atomic warheads, which are trying to secure. And that is a grave danger for the entire world. There's no question about that. And I've been trying to alert the world to that danger.
Those weapons of mass destruction got to be somewhere.
I was like, I gotta have died and things like this, and if God loved me so much, I just had things.
Nope, no weapons over there.
This is why I joined the Marine Corps.
במיוחד היום עם אמריקה, אני יודע מה זה אמריקה. אין כזה דבר שאפשר להזיז אותו בקלות, להזיז לכיוון הנכון.
הם אומרים שהם בעדינו, אבל כאילו...
לא יכניעו לו.
אז כשאני אומר, אנחנו עושים איזה משהו, אז הם...
יש שווה, אז נניח שהם אומרים משהו. אז אמרו, 80% מהאמריקאים תומכים בה. זה אבסורד.
The deal doesn't even require Iran to dismantle its military nuclear capability. Yes, it places limits on its military nuclear program for only a certain number of years. But when those restrictions expire, Iran will have an industrial-sized military nuclear capability ready to go and with zero provision for delay, no matter how bad Iran's behavior is. Terrible, terrible situation that we are all placed in, and especially Israel.
What is your secret? Because we don't seem to have the hang of that.
The secret is that we have America.
Obviously, it was a mistake. So George Bush made a mistake. We can make mistakes, but that one was a beauty. We should have never been in Iraq. We have destabilized the Middle East.
But so you still think he should be impeached? I think
it's my turn, isn't it?
You do whatever you want. You call it whatever you want. I want to tell you, they lied. Okay. They said there were weapons of mass destruction. There were none, and they knew there were none. There were no weapons of mass destruction.
All right.
When I'm president, I will adopt a strategy that focuses on three things when it comes to Iran. First, we will stand up to Iran's aggressive push to destabilize and dominate the region.
Iran is a problem in Iraq, a problem in Syria, a problem in Lebanon, a problem in Yemen, and will be a very, very major problem for Saudi Arabia.
The Israelis and the Saudis would love to see our money and our young men and women being killed to fight their enemies in Iran. Right. When you look at the bottom line, who this benefits if it leads to military action against Iran, it only benefits the Israelis and Saudi Arabia. And there's a precedent for it. We've already fought 2 wars against Iraq in favor of Israeli interests and Saudi interests. So we're always being pushed to get our people killed for their interests. So I think it could happen another time. Why not?
Now, the United States might be seen as Israel's most staunch ally, but that doesn't necessarily mean the officials of the two countries like each other. And here is something to prove the point. An article in The Atlantic quotes this as the latest description of Benjamin Netanyahu given by one of the Obama administration's officials. The reporter who interviewed the official says that he's keeping a running tally of similar name-calling incidents from over the years. And here are just some of the names given to the Israeli Prime Minister by White House officials.
אכפת לי מחיי כל אזרח ואזרח וחיי כל חייל וחייל. הייתי בשדה הקרב פעמים רבות, סיכנתי את חיי למען המדינה, ואינני מוכן לעשות ויתורים שיסכנו את המדינה שלנו. וצריך להבין, האינטרסים העליונים שלנו, וראשם הביטחון ואחדות ירושלים, אינם עומדים בראש מעייניהם של אותם גורמים אנונימיים שתוקפים אותנו ואותי אישית. הברית האסטרטגית והברית הערכית בין המדינות נמשכת ותימשך.
My name is Donald Trump, and I'm a big fan of Israel. And frankly, a strong prime minister is a strong Israel. And you truly have a great prime minister. In Benjamin Netanyahu, there's nobody like him. He's a winner. He's highly respected. He's highly thought of by all. And people really do have great, great respect for what's happened in Israel. So vote for Benjamin. Terrific guy, terrific leader, great for Israel.
A lot of people say an agreement can't be made, which is okay. I mean, sometimes agreements can't be made, not good. But, you know, you have both sides, really, but you have one side in particular growing up and learning that these are the worst people, these people are the worst people, et cetera, et cetera. It is a very, very tough agreement to make because the other side has been trained from the time they're children to hate Jewish people. But I will give it one hell of a shot, that I can tell you.
Well, I think, first of all, the fact that after many years of it coming down, I remember when we started doing the surveys in the 60s, approximately 30% of the American people were infected with serious anti-Semitism. In Europe, it's a lot worse. We did a similar survey in Russia in 1999, and the overall, same questions, and it came out to 44% of the Russian population, at least 99. We haven't done one since. You know, as compared to what is today 15% wow. are infected. Now,
what's right now at the top of the agenda for you from within the JCPA?
There are two issues at the top of our agenda at the very moment. One is the unbelievably important immigration debate in this country, to make sure that immigrants from around the world, particularly those from south of our border, have a chance here.
We're a global advocacy organization, and we advocate on behalf of Jewish interests and interests of the general community. And we do this at the local level, and we do this worldwide. We have over a 100-year history, and immigration has actually been on our agenda for much of that time.
Not only our Muslim communities, but African communities, Asian communities, Hispanic communities, and the wave still continues. It's not going to stop, nor should we want it to stop. As a matter of fact, it's one of the things I think we can be most proud of. So there's a second thing in that black box, an unrelenting stream of immigration, non-stop. Folks like me who were Caucasian of European descent, for the first time in 2017, will be in an absolute minority in the United States of America. Absolute minority. Fewer than 50% of the people in America from then and on will be white European stock. That's not a bad thing. That's a source of our strength.
You know, I used to say early on when I was a kid, I'd say, when I was a young senator, I'd say, if I were a Jew, I'd be a Zionist. I am a Zionist. You don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist.
The power of AIPAC and the lobby here, they own the Congress, will lead to our support for whatever the Israelis do, I think. And in an odd way, Lou, it doesn't matter.
The United States government has been hijacked by the globalists, Bilderberg-type people, the corporations. They're the ones who are running things. Y'all know the deal. The reason why Trump is better, because he's not a part of that crony system.
I've been with Israel so long in terms of I've received some of my greatest honors from Israel. My father before me, incredible. My daughter Ivanka is about to have a beautiful Jewish baby.
All of Donald Trump's children are either married to or dating Jews. All of them. The most famous of his kids, Ivanka Trump, she married Jared Kushner, who's Jewish, and she converted to Judaism herself. She actually took a Jewish name, Yael Trump. Her kids, Trump's grandkids, are Jewish. They probably call him Zadie. But it's not just Ivanka. Donald Jr. is married to Vanessa Hayden, who's Jewish. Eric Trump is married to Lara Yunaska, who's Jewish. They married under a Jewish chuppah or wedding canopy at Mar-a-Lago, an exclusive club that used to ban Jews until Trump filed a massive lawsuit against the bigots to let the Jews in. And then there's Tiffany Trump, Donald Trump's other daughter by Marla Maples. She's not married yet, but she's dating a Jewish man named Ross Mechanic. Trump has one more kid with Melania. His name is Barron. He's just 10. So it's not yet 5 kids out of 5 who were with Jews, but I wouldn't bet against Barron dating a Jew, would you? That's in Trump's personal life. His company, the Trump Organization, pretty Jewy. Executive Vice President, Michael Cohen. Other Executive Vice President, Jason Greenblatt. Chief Financial Officer, Alan Weisselberg. There's a token Gentile as Chief Operating Officer. Pretty much the Shabbos goy who goes into the office by himself on Yom Kippur. Here's Donald Trump as a parade marshal at the Salute to Israel March in New York in 2004, a dozen years ago. He's been pro-Israel and pro-Jewish long before this campaign. And his campaign? Jewish. Stephen Miller, the firebrand speechwriter and spin doctor who also gives the warm-up speeches at the crowd for Trump's rallies? Jewish. I saw this, Michael Abood, communications coordinator. Sounds Muslim, right? No, Sephardi Jew. Steve Mnuchin, finance chair, Jewish, of course. So everywhere Trump goes, he's pretty much outnumbered by Jews. His own family, his staff, his circle of friends. I wonder if he ever feels like he needs a break from us.
And we are far worse off now than we were 15 years ago. 15 years ago, we didn't have people coming around. I mean, the whole thing. And in all fairness, we went after Iraq. They did not knock down the World Trade Center, okay? It wasn't the Iraqis that knocked down the World Trade Center. You will find out who really knocked down the World Trade Center because they have papers in there that are very secret. You may find it's the Saudis, okay? But you will find out. But it wasn't Iraq.
Let's play some video, if we could, please, of a pretty stunning moment. Jim was talking about the publicity of this and how much we're seeing, but do you see that that chain around, the gold necklace around the President Trump's neck there? Well, Saudi King Salman presented that to the president. It's a gold medal. The collar of Abdulaziz Al Saud is what it's called, and it's the nation's highest honor. I want to ask you, Anousheh, what do you make of, what is the symbolism there? What is the intention as he gives him that honor? Because already what we are seeing, the grandeur of this welcome, is so different from what we've seen with past presidents.
Well, I think that Donald Trump has always kind of taken a softer stance when it's come to Saudi Arabia. You know, they were left off of his famous Muslim ban list and also his executive order barring Muslim immigrants from the U.S. And, you know, despite Saudi Arabia being one of the greatest exporters of radical Islam, Donald Trump has always taken a softer stance on them. And let's not forget, there's a $109 billion arms deal also on the table that he has to seal with the Saudis. And, you know, it's really interesting because in many ways there couldn't be a better time for Donald Trump to kind of be out of Washington and escape the siege-like atmosphere he's facing here back at home and be in Saudi Arabia. But at the same time, this really ambitious trip is full of diplomatic landmines. And I really think his first diplomatic blunder has the potential to start off in Saudi, in Riyadh.
Moscow and Washington say they hope that the FBI arrests of alleged Russian agents will not affect relations between the two. For more insight on this, we're now joined by former MI5 officer Annie Machon from Dusseldorf. Hello to you. So, the FBI says the suspects have been under investigation since 2004. If so, why has it taken so long to charge them? What do you make of the timing here?
Well, I think it's very interesting, of course. I mean, there have been reports that they've said they've been aware of the ring and since 2000, in fact. So, yes, the fact that it comes hard on the heels of a very successful meeting between the US and the Russian presidents in Washington is interesting politically. But I would suggest also that we could sort of delve behind the scenes a little bit. First of all, the intelligence agencies in the US have been very much under attack over the last year or two for a whole number of reasons. Their involvement in things like extraordinary rendition, torture, surveillance of domestic political activists, things like that. So to go to an old-fashioned, good old-fashioned Cold War spy story and regain a bit of credibility, I think is probably something that they would aspire to. So this is very much sort of familiar territory. Everyone loves a good spy story, and I think this is pure propaganda. But I think there's also another aspect to that as well, and that's very much the insider view. Within the intelligence world, there are competing agencies. I think at the last count there are at least 17 agencies in the US. And they all vie for position and prestige and resources and staff numbers. So, of course, if the FBI can produce this wonderful result suddenly out of the blue, then their credit will skyrocket and they will go up the pecking order. So I think there's a whole range of layers behind this sudden arrest, the political only being one of them.
So a possible PR stunt here. Let's continue. Neither Moscow nor Washington want this to affect their relations. Now, in your experience, how possible is it for intelligence and politics to be separated in this way?
Very difficult indeed, because the intelligence agencies do like to meddle in politics. Sometimes you do get rogue elements within agencies who will go off and do their own thing. I don't think in this case that's what happened. I think it's more likely that perhaps more hardline factions within the American administration perhaps egged on the FBI to try and get them to come up with this result because of the need to keep a sort of strategy of tension between the USA and Russia. Of course, if you have a strategy of tension, then what you get is additional military air bases in the Central Asia area and things like that, which of course is very good for big business, particularly companies like Halliburton that tends to build and supply these sort of bases to the US government. And many people who used to be involved in the old administration, the neocon administration, of course, are very closely linked to those sort of companies. So I think, one, it's a political advantage for the hardliners, and two, it's a great economic advantage, potentially, to a number of big US corporations.
You've given us some fascinating insight there into the workings of the back wings of Washington, but we've heard about the US Department of State trying to, the State Department distancing itself from the Justice Department's decision. What kind of an inside game does this indicate to you?
Well, I think it's interesting. I mean, something about the whole story doesn't ring quite true to me. I used to be a fan of the spy writer Graham Greene, who was a former intelligence officer. He wrote in the middle of the last century. He wrote a very good book called Our Man in Havana, where an MI6 officer in the novel builds up a fake spy ring in order to gain kudos and extra money from his political masters in the UK. So I'm wondering if there might be some element of something like this going on. I'm not too sure. But I think also it's very disingenuous. I mean, I think most people can see that it's a political hot potato within the different departments in the US. And it's very disingenuous that they're making such a big story out of this in the media. Because, of course, other spy rings have been caught in the US in the last decade. Most notably, the so-called dancing Israelis who were arrested shortly after 9/11. They were seen celebrating the collapse of the Twin Towers. And also the alleged art student spy ring, which was rounded up in 2002. And they, again, were supposedly Israeli Mossad agents. Now, both of these spy rings weren't prosecuted, and in fact, the stories have been quietly removed from things like Fox News websites and things. And the spies, or alleged spies, were just quietly deported back to Israel. There was no political hoo-ha, there was no media hoo-ha, and there was no prosecutions. So I think whatever happens to these alleged spies, and let's bear in mind that they are innocent until proven guilty, whatever happens to them is done for political reasons.
All right, very interesting insight there indeed. Former MI5 officer Annie Machon from Düsseldorf. Thank you.
We're backing people, rebels. You know, they call them the rebels, the freedom rebels, they have all these glamorous names, right? We have been in there for 15 years, and we are far worse off now than we were 15 years ago. 15 years ago, we didn't have people coming around. I mean, the whole thing. And in all fairness, we went after Iraq. They did not knock down the World Trade Center, okay? It wasn't the Iraqis that knocked down the World Trade Center. You will find out who really knocked down the World Trade Center, because they have papers in there that are very secret. You may find it's the Saudis, okay? But you will find out. But it wasn't Iraq.
Israel's former Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, would boldly state that we are benefiting from one thing, and that is the attack on the Twin Towers and Pentagon.
The United States has wholeheartedly supported essentially state-sponsored terrorism, both domestically in Israel and as part of Israel's foreign policy. The American relationship with Israel is the root cause of most of the problems the United States is facing around the world today.
Well, I would say this, that there's one big elephant in the living room. It's never asked about. People don't like to put it on any video or anything like that. But it is the relationship between the United States of America and the State of Israel. It's the fly in the ointment. It's gotten us into a peck of trouble in the Middle East.
It is my honor to introduce the front runner for the Republican presidential nomination, a captain of industry, investor, author, public personality, a mensch with a lot of chutzpah. Ladies and gentlemen, Donald Trump.
I grew up in Brooklyn, Queens, and Israel was always very paramount in our mind. It's an honor to be with you, and I've devoted so much time over my life to Israel. And the other politicians, they can talk, but believe me, they haven't done what I've done. I've received many, many awards. I was the Grand Marshal. I was the Grand Marshal of the Israeli Day Parade at a very dangerous time when people said, don't do it, don't do it.
Hillary Clinton, is she a friend of Israel?
Whether she is or not, she doesn't have the strength or the energy to help Israel. I'm telling you, she doesn't. Israel needs more than just our support. They need strength. They need real power behind that.
I know Bibi very well. In fact, he asked me if I do a commercial for him. I think I'm the only so-called celebrity that did a commercial for him. And, you know, and it was a nice commercial and everything else, and I hope he's going to do great, and I think he's going to do great. My name is Donald Trump, and I'm a big fan of Israel. And frankly, a strong prime minister is a strong Israel. And you truly have a great prime minister. In Benjamin Netanyahu, there's nobody like him.
Israel's former prime minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, would boldly state that we are benefiting from one thing, and that is the attack on the Twin Towers and Pentagon.
The United States has wholeheartedly supported essentially state-sponsored terrorism, both domestically in Israel and as part of Israel's foreign policy. The American relationship with Israel is the root cause of most of the problems the United States is facing around the world today.
We have been in there for 15 years, and we are far worse off now than we were 15 years ago. 15 years ago, we didn't have people coming around. I mean, the whole thing. And in all fairness, we went after Iraq. They did not knock down the World Trade Center, okay? It wasn't the Iraqis that knocked down the World Trade Center. You will find out who really knocked down the World Trade Center because they have papers in there that are very secret. You may find it's the Saudis, okay? But you will find out. But it wasn't Iraq.
Israel's former prime minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, would boldly state that we are benefiting from one thing, and that is the attack on the Twin Towers and Pentagon.
My name is Donald Trump, and I'm a big fan of Israel. And frankly, a strong prime minister is a strong Israel. And you truly have a great prime minister.
The head of the Port Authority was Louis Eisenberg, and he personally oversaw the privatization that led to Larry Silverstein and Frank Lowy obtaining the 99-year lease for the towers on July 24th, 2001, just 6 weeks before 9/11. But Silverstein demanded and got $3.5 billion worth of insurance payable in cash if the towers were destroyed. Now, the fact that Silverstein was close friends with Benjamin Netanyahu, or that he skipped his daily breakfast at the Windows on the World restaurant located on the 107th floor of the North Tower on 9/11, or that his son and daughter also happened to be unexpectedly absent on 9/11, is all just amazing good fortune, we are told.
In the days before, I think, the World Trade Center, the Twin Towers fell, I understand you had daily breakfast meetings with people, I think, in the Windows of the World, the famous restaurant, the World Trade Center.
That's correct.
But you weren't there for breakfast on the day of September 11th. Why was that?
That morning, my wife had made an appointment for me at the dermatologist, who I have to visit with regularity, right? And as I'm dressing to go to the dermatologist that morning, I looked at my wife and said, you know, I've got so much to do downtown. Cancel the dermatologist. I've got to go downtown. She got upset. She said, you can't cancel. You've got to go.
Was that Larry Silverstein's luck?
It was clearly my luck. It was clearly my luck.
Now, the fact that Silverstein was close friends with Benjamin Netanyahu.
In Benjamin Netanyahu, there's nobody like him.
It was widely reported that men had been celebrating the attack after recording the first plane strike. They were not Al-Qaeda, but they were detained.
I grabbed my binoculars and I could see the towers from my window. And this is where I'm looking. And all of a sudden, down there, I see this van parked. And I see 3 guys on top of the van. And I could see that they were like happy. You know, they didn't look shocked to me. You know, they didn't look shocked.
There was a group of Israelis, some of whom later were revealed as Mossad assets, who were arrested after cheering and high-fiving and videotaping the crash of the airplanes into the World Trade Towers.
Several other men were detained after a van full of explosives was stopped outside of Manhattan.
Earlier, we had heard that an FBI spokesperson said that there was a report on the George Washington Bridge, which is another facility which you folks are responsible for policing, a report that there had been a van stopped there that had explosives.
Asked this week about another sprawling investigation and the detention of 60 Israelis since September 11th,
the Bush administration treated the questions like hot potatoes.
I would just refer you to the Department of Justice with it. I'm not familiar with the report.
I'm aware that some Israeli citizens have been detained. With respect to why they are being detained and the other aspects of your question, whether it's because they are in intelligence services or what they were doing, I will defer to the Department of Justice and the FBI to answer that.
On March 6, 2002, a draft report from the DEA said it may well be an organized intelligence gathering activity. Despite all of this, all the Israelis were let go without any espionage charges being filed. Fox News anchors Brit Hume and Carl Cameron would do a 4-part investigation into these allegations in December of 2001 and yield stunning results.
It has been more than 16 years since a civilian working for the Navy was charged with passing secrets to Israel. Jonathan Pollard pled guilty to conspiracy to commit espionage and is serving a life sentence. At first, Israeli leaders claimed Pollard was part of a rogue operation, but later took responsibility for his work. Now, Fox News has learned some U.S. investigators believe that there are Israelis again very much engaged in spying in and on the U.S.
Since September 11th, more than 60 Israelis have been arrested or detained, either under the new Patriot anti-terrorism law or for immigration violations. A handful of active Israeli military were among those detained, according to investigators, who say some of the detainees also failed polygraph questions when asked about alleged surveillance activities against and in the United States. Investigators suspect that the Israelis may have gathered intelligence about the attacks in advance and not shared it. A highly placed investigator said there are, quote, tie-ins, but when asked for details, he flatly refused to describe them, saying, quote, evidence linking these Israelis to 911 is classified. I cannot tell you about evidence that has been gathered. It's classified information.
Now, when the FBI investigated, it quickly unraveled to be the largest foreign spy ring ever uncovered inside the United States, the largest. Even the Soviet Union had not been spying on the United States as much as Israel has been doing. So the FBI started to round up these spies. They started to arrest them very quietly, and they were about halfway through this process of rounding up this spy ring when 9/11 happened.
Numerous classified documents obtained by Fox News indicate that even prior to September 11th, as many as 140 other Israelis had been detained or arrested in a secretive and sprawling investigation into suspected espionage by Israelis in the United States. Investigators from numerous government agencies are part of a working group that's been compiling evidence since the mid-90s. These documents detail hundreds of incidents in cities and towns across the country that investigators say, quote, may well be an organized intelligence gathering activity. The first part of the investigation focuses on Israelis who say they are art students from the University of Jerusalem and Bezalel Academy. Documents say they, quote, targeted and penetrated military bases, the DEA, FBI, and dozens of other government facilities, and even secret offices and unlisted private homes of law enforcement and intelligence personnel. The majority of those questioned, quote, stated they served in military intelligence, electronic surveillance intercept, and or explosive ordnance units. Why would Israelis spy in and on the U.S.? A General Accounting Office investigation referred to Israel as Country A and said, quote, according to a U.S. intelligence agency, the government of Country A conducts the most aggressive espionage operation against the U.S. of any U.S. ally. The document concludes, quote, Israel possesses the resources and technical capability to achieve its collection objectives.
What about this question of advanced knowledge of what was going to happen on 9/11? How clear are investigators that some Israeli agents may have known something?
Well, it's very explosive information, obviously, and there's a great deal of evidence that they say they have collected. None of it necessarily conclusive. It's more when they put it all together. A bigger question, they say, is how could they not have known? Almost a direct quote, Britt.
It is now apparent that this intelligence ring was inside the U.S., had prior knowledge of 9/11, and had a classified role in 9/11, which officials refused to discuss. It was also able to penetrate U.S. intelligence agencies and secret offices, yet all were released. The men who were detained due to the report they were taping the first plane crash and then celebrating and joking about it actually went on television and admitted it was their job to record the attack.
And at that point, we were taken for another round of questioning, this time related to our allegedly being members of Mossad. The fact of the matter is, we are coming from a country that experiences terror daily. Our purpose was to document the event.
How could they have known about the attack? And who sent them to document it? The evidence points to a large intelligence network inside the United States that had teams on the ground, such as the ones recording the attack, and electronic surveillance teams gathering information. Another team who was involved that day detonated explosives on the ground.
We have both suspects under K. We have the suspect who drove in the van exploded. Yeah, I just want to make sure you and your guys are all right over there, K, that's all. You know, we have both P.O.Trans driven that exploded. What location? King Street between 6 and 7. Shooting is on the scene on King 6 and 7. What unit are you?
How would these teams obtain their information?
The investigation on our side basically tracked back to two companies. The first one was called Amdocs. This is an Israeli-owned company which does the billing for 90% of the telephone companies inside the United States.
Fox News has learned that some American terrorism investigators fear certain suspects in the September 11th attacks may have managed to stay ahead of them by knowing who and when investigators are calling on the telephone. How? By obtaining and analyzing data that's generated every time someone in the U.S. makes a phone call.
One sitting in city, please.
Here's how the system works. Most directory assistance calls and virtually all call records and billing in the U.S. are done for the phone companies by Amdocs Limited, an Israeli-based private telecommunications company. Amdocs has contracts with the 25 biggest phone companies in America and more worldwide. It is virtually impossible to make a call on normal phones without generating an Amdocs record of it. In recent years, the FBI and other government agencies have investigated Amdocs more than once. Sources tell Fox News that in 1999, the super-secret National Security Agency, headquartered in northern Maryland, issued what's called a top-secret, sensitive, compartmentalized information report, TSSCI, warning that records of calls in the United States were getting into foreign hands, in Israel in particular. Fox News has learned that the NSA has held numerous classified conferences to warn the FBI and CIA how Amdocs records could be used.
So if you know the name of a police officer, or even if you know the name just of an informant, you can follow that network of who's talking to who and basically determine that whole association of names and contacts that represent that unit of operation.
Fox News has documents of a 1997 drug trafficking case in Los Angeles in which telephone information, the types that Amdocs collects, was used to, quote, completely compromise the communications of the FBI, the Secret Service, the DEA, and the LAPD.
Amdocs would not be the only company with ties to the Israeli government. Israel was also gathering information from a separate business, Converse Infosys, who was also listening in.
This company, inside the United States, installs and maintains the phone tapping equipment that law enforcement and the government use to eavesdrop on your phone calls.
The company is Converse Infosys, a subsidiary of an Israeli-run private telecommunications firm with offices throughout the U.S. It provides wiretapping equipment for law enforcement. Here's how wiretapping works in the U.S. Every time you make a call, it passes through the nation's elaborate network of switchers and routers run by the phone companies. Custom computers and software made by companies like Converse are tied into that network to intercept, record, and store the wiretapped calls, and at the same time transmit them to investigators.
We know we just had this FISA bill go through that granted immunity to the telecom companies. It was Converse Infosystem that was setting up all these special rooms in all the switching centers where the law enforcement or the government or whoever could simply push a button and listen to your phone call. Gone are the days of the little alligator clips and wires needed to eavesdrop on a phone call. They can sit in a room anywhere in America, touch a few buttons, and listen to your phone call.
But the complaint about this system is that the wiretap computer programs made by Converse have in effect a back door through which wiretaps themselves can be intercepted by unauthorized parties. Adding to the suspicions is the fact that in Israel, Converse works closely with the Israeli government and under special programs gets reimbursed for up to 50% of its research and development costs by the Israeli Ministry of Industry and Trade. But investigators within the DEA, INS, and FBI have all told Fox News that to pursue or even suggest Israeli spying through Converse is considered career suicide. And sources say that while various FBI inquiries into Converse have been conducted over the years, they've been halted before the actual equipment has ever been thoroughly tested for leaks.
More to the point, agents within the U.S. government have been told point blank that to even suggest Israeli spying or an Israel link to 9/11 is career suicide. It's been described as the third rail of American politics. If you touch it, you die. You never get to come back again. It's all over. It's the black pit where you can never go.
But there is a bitter turf war internally at FBI. It is the FBI's office in Quantico, Virginia, that has jurisdiction over awarding contracts and buying intercept equipment. And for years, they've thrown much of the business to Converse. A handful of former U.S. law enforcement officials involved in awarding Converse government contracts over the years now work for the company. Numerous sources say some of those individuals were asked to leave government service under what knowledgeable sources call troublesome circumstances that remain under administrative review within the Justice Department. And what troubles investigators most, particularly in New York in the counterterrorism investigation of the World Trade Center attack, is that on a number of cases, suspects that they had sought to wiretap and surveil immediately changed their telecommunications processes. They started acting much differently as soon as those supposedly secret wiretaps went into place.
Somehow, suspected terrorists who were being surveilled by these very Israelis were able to change their behavior to elude the FBI. Israel's former Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, would boldly state that we are benefiting from one thing, and that is the attack on the Twin Towers and Pentagon.
The United States has wholeheartedly supported essentially state-sponsored terrorism, both domestically in Israel and as part of Israel's foreign policy. The American relationship with Israel is the root cause of most of the problems the United States is facing around the world today.
Well, I would say this, that there's one big elephant in the living room. It's never asked about. People don't like to put it on any video or anything like that. But it is the relationship between the United States of America and the State of Israel. It's the fly in the ointment. It's gotten us into a peck of trouble in the Middle East.
Autograph with me, Susan Madaris. We are coming to you from New York City, and my guest this week is Dr. Alan Sabrosky. He's joining me via satellite from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Join us. Alan Sabrosky is a writer and consultant specializing in national and international security affairs. In December 1988, he received the Superior Civilian Service Award after more than 5 years of service at the U.S. Army War College as Director of Studies, Strategic Studies Institute, and holder of the General of the Army Douglas MacArthur Chair of Research. A Marine Corps Vietnam veteran and a 1986 graduate of the U.S. Army War College, Dr. Sabrosky's teaching and research appointments have included the U.S. Military Academy and the Center for Strategic and International Studies. While in government service, he held concurrent adjunct professorships at Georgetown University and the Johns Hopkins University of Advanced International Studies. His published work includes 13 books or monographs and over 160 articles, chapters, and book reviews. He is currently completing a book-length study on the U.S. use of military force as an instrument of foreign policy titled Presidential War: The Politics of Military Intervention. Dr. Sabrosky is also an editor at Veterans Today, where his latest series of articles regarding Israeli involvement in the 9/11 attacks against the United States is a shocking expose of how the Israeli Mossad planned the attacks and how the U.S. military had prior knowledge. An argument often not discussed, especially by someone like Alan Sabrosky, who is an American of Jewish ancestry. However, Stabrowski bravely addresses this sensitive and controversial topic as someone devoted to the security of the United States at any cost. So what happens when a military insider puts the devastating terror attacks of 9/11 directly at Israel's doorstep? Dr. Alan Stabrowski, thank you so much for joining us on The Autograph.
My pleasure, Susan.
Tell us how you make the case for Israel's involvement in the tragic 9/11 attacks.
There were several different ways of doing it, Susan, and this may be a little bit more background than some of your people need, but I began to have suspicions about what had happened on 9/11 about 2 weeks after the attacks. There were several discontinuities that made no sense to me whatsoever. The behavior on the part of some of the named terrorists, these 19 Arabs on 4 planes, running around flying schools like loose cannon, not having the pilot skills to fly the aircraft, no recognition for what they had done afterwards in their own area, their own community. And it struck me that for many reasons, none of the arguments that were being given for what they did made any sense. But I then immediately forgot about it until about 2 years ago. And then I came across a video which I found to be extremely disturbing. That video was an interview with a Dutch demolitions expert named Danny Jowenko. And it concerned the collapse of the 3rd World Trade Center tower to go down on September 11th. This was the 47-story World Trade Center 7, the 3rd tallest building at the World Trade Center. Jowenko had never heard of it. Neither had I. And when you looked at the building, you saw that there was effectively no damage to any face of the building. It had not been hit by a plane. It had not been taken major trauma from debris, and it went straight down into its own footprint in about 7 seconds in what was visibly a controlled demolition. You know, and it was pretty clear that whatever those 19 named Arabs on 4 planes, 2 of them at the World Trade Center, had or had not done, they could not have had any possible effect on that 3rd building going down. Shortly after that, I came across, partly out of my own curiosity, which this definitely aroused, and a very extensive video, both of which I've cited, by the way, in some of my recent articles, which were taken on 9/11 itself from what became Ground Zero, the base of World Trade Center 1 and 2, the Twin Towers, involving police, emergency services personnel, newspaper and television correspondents, and you can see and hear secondary explosions at the base of the World Trade Center buildings. Now, planes impacting at 800 to 1,000 feet above the ground are not going to cause secondary explosions at the ground floor. And this followed over into other reports, also there on September 11th, about vans in the area, white vans. In one case, a van was picked up by police and people arrested at the access to a major bridge. The van was filled with explosives, and the 2 people in it were Israelis. In Bergen, New Jersey, same day, a van with several people in it had set up cameras. Before the first plane hit, they were filming the Twin Towers, and they were celebrating. High fives. It was a good thing for them. Residents called police. Police arrested them. All 5 were Israelis. What intrigued me, in addition to angering me, was that within days, all of these reports disappeared from the media. Most Americans don't know that a 3rd building went down at the World Trade Center. Most have never heard about the secondary explosions reported by CNN, ABC, Fox, and others at the foundation of World Trade Center 1 and 2. None have ever heard about the vans. So I began looking at this very carefully, and one of the things that I began looking at was just what would it have taken for a special operations group of any particular nationality to have done 9/11, either by having taken control of the operation we have been told about, of the 19 named Arabs on 4 planes, or having run a parallel operation where you have 4 planes being hijacked, but there is another operation being done with those in concert. And I picked up 3 particular factors that would need to be taken into account. One was motivation, a second was expertise, and the third, the critical one, was access. Now, when it came to motivation, it's probably a very sad commentary on where we are in the world today, that there are an awful lot of countries and groups out there in the world that have either real or contrived reasons to hate America. It wasn't that way when I was a young man, but then many things weren't the same way now as they were when I was a young man. But almost all of the groups and countries that might want to do this only had a negative reason for doing it. They wanted to hurt us. The Israelis had a positive reason, and it's one that a number of their supporters had talked about from the 1990s on up, and what was called the Project for a New American Century, whose members included, by the way, later Vice President Richard Cheney, later Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld, and many of the so-called neoconservatives, most of them Jewish but not all, who came into the first Bush administration. Israel had a positive reason, and it was get the United States involved in a war in the Middle East with a powerful, enraged, anti-Islamic strain within the American public, that they needed a catalytic event to produce this. They even talked about it in terms of another Pearl Harbor is needed to bring the American people into this fight. The second was expertise. Lots of expertise out there. Bringing buildings down and controlled demolitions is something that almost any intelligence agency of any country in the world can do or can contract. There are many private agencies that do this. But one thing is absolutely clear. Neither those 19 named Arabs on the plane nor Al-Qaeda as an organization had the expertise, the technical expertise to do that. And there is one very clear proof of that. If Al-Qaeda and its affiliates had had the ability to wire even one building for a controlled demolition at the World Trade Center, much less all 3 of them, the so-called green zone in the heart of Baghdad would have been a pile of rubble. And it wasn't. But the last is access. The World Trade Center security was an Israeli-owned company. Security at all 3 of the airports from which the 4 aircraft on 9/11 departed, ICTS, was an Israeli security company. That security company, by the way, also had security at the airports in Paris and Amsterdam later, from which the so-called shoe and underwear bombers departed. The security company at the World Trade Center had 24/7 state-of-the-art electronic surveillance and foot patrols. Wiring a building for a controlled demolition, and I must confess here, this is not my specialty. I have heard what people who do this for a living have said about it, but it is not my specialty. But the description of it in the video of Danny Jawenko that I mentioned to you is a very good one on this. And he described it in which if you needed to do it in a few hours, you would need 30 to 40 people, fewer if you had more time, cutting open the walls, literally cutting open the walls, all the way around the building, implanting the explosives, running detonator cord and cable, wires to put them to a control system, coordinating all of this activity. This is not something that involves the casual bringing in of a briefcase and leaving it at the foot of a building's elevator and going out again. This is extensive work, and it would require the type of extensive sustained access that could not go unremarked by the security forces in place on this. They also needed the ability to evade an apprehension and to have their escape concealed. And they had that done. All of the Israelis who were apprehended in those vans were later released in about 2 months at the direction of Michael Chertoff, then the second director of Homeland Security, a dual U.S.-Israeli national. There is no mention of them in the mainstream media, which is largely Zionist-owned. All of the major networks, all of the major national newspapers, all 3 of the weekly news magazines, all of the major political journals, most of the major publishing houses. It simply didn't happen. The only thing that happened on 9/11 that was discussed in the media, that have been accepted by the government, that was described in the 9/11 Commission, are 19 named Arabs on 4 planes bringing down 2 buildings. And the rest of it, in Orwellian terms, has become a non-event and a non-story.
And you know, since you just pointed to the 9/11 Commission report, there is an understanding that the primary motivation for 9/11 was U.S. support for Israel's brutal oppression of the Palestinians, also conveyed in the 9/11 Commission report. I guess my question is, how are these 2 incidents or theories, so to say, related? And, you know, there are those that will brush off your argument as a conspiracy theory. Are you concerned?
I don't think that's so much of a conspiracy theory. I was smiling when you said that because to tell a bit of a story on this. Back in the early 80s, when I was in Washington at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, one of our visitors for a luncheon talk was a young gentleman then named Francois Heisbourg. Heisbourg was the special assistant to French President Francois Mitterrand. And I don't know how the subject came up, but he said, you know, Americans never see conspiracies anywhere. We French, he said, we see conspiracies everywhere. And both of us are wrong. This is not a conspiracy in the sense that it is usually used, the word is usually used, which is to denigrate an opposing argument. When someone in the United States says that that's a conspiracy or that's a conspiracy theory, by definition they mean it is irrational, illegitimate, and without proof. All I would suggest to people is that you look at the films of WTC-7, that 3rd tower going down on September 11th. You look and listen to the reports on September 11th with the secondary explosions. These are not fantasies. They happened. You look at the reports on September 12th of the apprehension of Israelis with vans of explosives and cameras filming the events on September 11. These are not fantasies. And you look at the people riddling the American government, all of the Middle East people in State Defense and the National Security Council, Deputy Secretary of Defense Paul Wolfowitz, Undersecretary of Defense for Policy Douglas Feith, who used to be a friend of mine, by the way, from Philadelphia. These people were all part of the neoconservative movement. Many of these people are dual U.S.-Israeli nationals. All of their primary allegiance is to Israel.
In a recent article, Stubrowski explains why he is anti-Israeli. He notes, because of what it has done to the U.S. in the furtherance of its own goals. The USS Liberty incident and 9/11 obviously stand out. And because of the leverage it has acquired over the U.S. government and its policies through the machinations of the domestic Jewish community here.
My concern is that I don't much care about other people or other countries. I don't hate anyone in particular. I don't like anyone in particular. I'm an American. My loyalty is strictly to the United States. And I don't care what my ethnicity is or what my ancestry is. My allegiance is that. And my concern is only whether something helps or hurts the United States. And I think anyone who's a citizen of any country can very properly have similar feelings toward their country. What I'm concerned about is what is done to hurt America. And it is very clear that over a period of the last 40-odd years, that the penetration of the American political process, the effective subordination of the Congress in particular to Israel, when an Israeli prime minister can get 29 standing ovations from a Congress that can't give that much support to one of their own presidents, no matter how outlandish the statements, you have something as close to a puppet agency as you're going to find. Our policy in the Middle East has for decades been manipulated increasingly in terms of what benefits Israel and not what benefits the United States, even when that policy is articulated and supported by individuals who are sworn officials of the United States government. And to me, when a sworn official of the United States government, whether or not that person has dual Israeli citizenship, manipulates American policy, contrives crises and tragedies like 9/11, contrives wars like Afghanistan and Iraq, and now tries to get us into a war with Iran, all in the service of Israel, spending American lives in that process, they commit high treason. And they need to be treated in that manner.
In his article, Zionism Unmasked, The Dark Face of Jewish Nationalism, Subrowski looks at the differences between Jewish nationalism, or Zionism, and that of other countries and cultures. He argues that, first of all, Zionism is a real witch's brew of xenophobia, racism, ultranationalism, and militarism that places it way outside of a mere nationalist context. Secondly, Zionism undermines civic loyalty. Thirdly, the enemy of normal nationalist movement is the occupying power, and perhaps its allies, and once independence is achieved, normal relations with the occupying power are truly the norm. But for Zionism, almost everyone out there is an actual or potential enemy. I continue our interview by asking him about his theory.
Well, I think the first thing to note, and I want to be sure that this is emphasized, is that Jewish nationalism or Zionism is not Judaism. It has nothing to do with Judaism. Many of the Zionists are very secular Jews. They are not practicing Jews in a religious sense. The thing that's intriguing about Zionism, and I think I use the phrase that it's a real witch's brew of xenophobia, ultranationalism, and militarism, with a nice scrap of regional imperialism built into it. Most nationalism is not like that. Most nationalism is intended to be a unifying force, but it doesn't go to such an extreme level. A second element of it is that when you have competing nationalisms, it's very, very rare to find anything that involves the level of antipathy and hatred to the other side.
Subrowski believes that Americans should see where they stand now, what should be done, and where America must stand if it wishes to alter the world Zionism has contrived. While he paints a realistic picture of what the current situation is, he addresses why so many attempts to contain Zionism in the U.S. have failed throughout the years. You know, a good friend of the show, James Morris, who has contributed greatly not only to this show, The Autograph, but also in raising public awareness, notably on his website, AmericaHijacked.com. I remember him saying that he was a registered Republican for many years, but ultimately found it very hard as an American to relate to that party, or the Democratic Party for that matter, and became extremely frustrated, notably because of the government's support for AIPAC and similar organizations and the United States support for Israel in general. Just recently, he was quoted as saying that he has become an independent. But I guess my question is, and my point is, that are we seeing more public awareness, more frustration inside the United States among Americans, because the ones that I talk to seem to be very, very upset, to say the least, and they seem to feel very strongly about this issue.
I think many Americans are finding it difficult to relate to their government, but the idea that there's any kind of a mass movement there because of the relationship to Israel is simply not the case. There is no vehicle for that type of opposition to have been created. There is not even an awareness on the part of most of the American people about the details of 9/11 that I mentioned to you. One of my last article was much more of a practical, how do we get the word out? And I think that if people did understand what had really happened at 9/11, you could very rapidly see a very substantial reorientation of public opinion.
Dr. Alan Strobrowski, thank you so much for those comments. So much more to talk about. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Hopefully, we will see you back on The Autograph next time here in New York City.
Susan, thank you very much. I sincerely hope I too can meet you there, and I'm only sorry that the missed plane connections didn't make it possible last night.
No worries. It was a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you, Susan. You take care. All the best wishes to you.
That's all the time we have for this edition of The Autograph here on Press TV. Thank you for staying with us and watching. Remember, you can always send us your emails to theautograph@susanmadaris.com. We are always looking forward to them. Until next week in another show from all of us here in New York City. Goodbye.
I don't want to be involved in conspiracy theories. There are lots of them. They can go on. We can speculate on that forever. What we really need to know is how those buildings came down.
World Trade Center 7 collapsed because of fires fueled by office furnishings. It did not collapse from explosives or from fuel oil fires.
To undermine scientific integrity is to undermine our democracy.
This is what NIST has done, denied and ignored crucial evidence.
The American people absolutely need the truth of 9/11.
More than 1,500 architects and engineers and 12,000 others, including many scientists, have signed the petition calling for a scientific investigation of the destruction of the Twin Towers and World Trade Center Building 7. The report, issued by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, referred to as NIST, was not valid science.
They're talking about a single columnar collapse or failure that resulted in a total collapse of the building.
Building number 7 descended in free fall for the first 100 feet, which means that there was absolutely no resistance to the descent whatsoever.
So all of the columns really needed to be severed at the same time.
The symmetry is the smoking gun.
NIST has admitted it went into free fall for 8 stories.
You don't need to be an engineer or an architect to see what happened to those buildings.
Dit is controlled demolition. Zeker weten. Zeker weten.
What I saw, it was a classic implosion. The center of the core, the penthouse area, starts to move first, and then the building follows along with it.
NIST excluded the document from FEMA in Appendix C that documented the evidence of melting steel.
In an office fire, you cannot generate enough heat to melt steel.
There were these iron microspheres present in all of the dust samples. They needed to have been formed in extremely high temperatures.
All the characteristics of the microspheres, along with what I see in the attack of the beams that were actually found, tell me that thermite was involved in melting those steel beams.
In the dust, what we have found is a modern version
of thermite, which we call nanothermite.
NIST concedes that they found no evidence for explosives. So then we asked them, well, did you look? And they said, no, we did not look for explosives or residues of explosives.
And in fact, the evidence is overwhelming that these red-grade crystals are very high-temperature incendiaries.
And we have watched as scientific integrity has been undermined and scientific research politicized in an effort to advance predetermined ideological agendas.
If this is a crime, I think everybody agrees it's a crime. Evidence was removed from the scene of the crime. You can't do science when you are deprived of the evidence and when your hypothesis is the least valid instead of the most likely. When the most likely hypothesis in the case of Building 7 wasn't even mentioned. This is not science.
All right, this video is not going to be very popular amongst Trump supporters and fans of Israel, but let's just keep it real here. The Israelites of the Bible are not the same people that are occupying Israel right now, and that's a fact. And I'm going to show you who Donald Trump is and what country he actually stands for, because it's not America. Donald Trump has come into office and he said a lot of things. He's made a lot of moves that made even people that doubted him completely think, hey, this guy might be the right person, but it's all a farce. I told you in the beginning that he was the law and order president. He was all about the military and patriotism. How many times did we hear him say that? America first, patriotism, another one of the isms. As soon as he becomes president, he puts the Muslim travel ban into effect, which causes Iran to threaten to drop the dollar. And then within 6 hours of that claim, all of a sudden, they're doing nuclear missile tests. And then Trump hits them with sanctions. And now all of a sudden, Iran's continuing to do this anyways. They know that this is a death wish, that this will cause all-out war, but that's exactly what Trump's job is to do. And if you don't believe me, I'm going to prove it to you right now. This is the Freemason man god, Albert Pike, in the letters he wrote to Manzini, outlining 3 world wars that would need to occur. The first 2 world wars, just as he recommended, happened and unfolded just as he said. The Third World War must be fomented by taking advantage of the differences caused by the agentur of the Illuminati between the political Zionists and the leaders of the Islamic world. The war must be conducted in such a way that Islam, the Muslim Arabic worlds, and the political Zionism, the state of Israel, mutually destroy each other. Meanwhile, the other nations, once more divided on the issue, will be constrained to fight to the point of complete physical, moral, spiritual, and economic exhaustion. And it goes on. But if you followed my channel, you've heard all this. Now, why am I bringing all this up right now? Because the people that Donald Trump have surrounded himself are not Americans. They all have allegiance to Israel and the Jewish community, nothing to do with American values. So listen to this. This is going to take about 10 minutes to explain how many people surrounding Donald Trump, including his own son, are not for America. And Donald Trump will indeed start the world war that Manzini and Albert Pike outlined. And you'll see this. Watch this.
Michael Aboud, Communications Coordinator, Donald J. Trump for President, Sephardic Jew. Paul Schleitner, Chairman, Supervisory Board, Deutsche Bank, Donald Trump's largest lender, Ashkenazi Jew. Miriam Adelson, Endorser, Donald J. Trump for President, Donor, Future 45 PAC, Finance Vice Chairman, Trump Presidential Inaugural Committee, Ashkenazi Jew. Sheldon Adelson, Endorser, Donald J. Trump for President, Donor, Future 45 PAC, Finance Vice Chairman, Trump Presidential Inaugural Committee, Ashkenazi Jew. Paul Atkins, member, President Trump's Strategic and Policy Forum, Ashkenazi Jew. Brian Ballard, Finance Vice Chairman, Trump Presidential Inaugural Committee, Ashkenazi Jew. Elliot Broidy, Vice Chairman, Trump Victory Committee, Finance Vice Chairman, Trump Presidential Inaugural Committee, Ashkenazi Jew. Safra Katz, Executive Committee Member, Trump Presidential Transition Team, Ashkenazi Jew. Michael Cohen, Executive Vice President and Special Counsel, the Trump Organization, Ashkenazi Jew. Director, United States National Economic Council, Ashkenazi Jew. Delos Cosgrove, Member, President Trump's Strategic and Policy Forum, Ashkenazi Jew. Gil Deser, President, Trump Desert Development, Ashkenazi Jew. Michael Deser, Founder, Trump Desert Development, Ashkenazi Jew. Louis Eisenberg, Chairman, Trump Victory Committee, Finance Co-Chairman, Trump Presidential Inaugural Committee, Ashkenazi Jew. Boris Epstein, Senior Advisor, Donald J. Trump for President, Ashkenazi Jew. Stephen Feinberg, Donor, Trump Victory Fund, Member, Trump Economic Advisory Council, Ashkenazi Jew. Lawrence Fink, Member, President Trump's Strategic and Policy Forum, Ashkenazi Jew. Alan Fishman, Chairman, Ladder Capital, Donald Trump's second largest lender, Ashkenazi Jew. Chairman, Ladder Capital, Donald Trump's second largest lender, Ashkenazi Jew. David Friedman, Co-Chairman, Israel Advisory Committee for Donald Trump, United States Ambassador to Israel, Ashkenazi Jew. Samuel Fox, Vice Chairman, Trump Victory Committee, Ashkenazi Jew. Alan Garten, Executive Vice President and General Counsel, the Trump Organization, Ashkenazi Jew. Bruce Gelb, Endorser, Donald J. Trump for President, Ashkenazi Jew. Michael Glassner, Deputy Campaign Manager and National Political Director, Donald J. Trump for President. Special Advisor for Operations, Trump Presidential Transition Team, Ashkenazi Jew. Executive Vice President of Strategic Development, the Trump Organization, Ashkenazi Jew. Jason Greenblatt, Executive Vice President and Chief Legal Officer, the Trump Organization, Co-Chairman, Israel Advisory Committee for Donald J. Trump. President Trump's Special Representative for International Negotiations, Ashkenazi Jew. Vincent Harris, Former Digital Strategy Manager, Donald J. Trump for President, Ashkenazi Jew. Thomas Hicks Sr., Finance Vice Chairman, Trump Presidential Inaugural Committee, Ashkenazi Jew. Carl Icahn, Endorser, Donald J. Trump for President, Special Advisor to the President for Regulatory Reform, Ashkenazi Jew. Gail Icahn, Finance Vice Chairman, Trump Presidential Inaugural Committee, Ashkenazi Jew. Robert Eager, Member, President Trump's Strategic and Policy Forum, Ashkenazi Jew. Travis Kalanick, Member, President Trump's Strategic and Policy Forum, Ashkenazi Jew. Calico, Donor, Trump Victory Fund, Ashkenazi Jew. Daniel Kowalski, Deputy Policy Director, Donald J. Trump for President, Member, Trump Economic Advisory Council, Ashkenazi Jew. Charles Kushner, Endorser, Donald J. Trump for President, Donor, Make America Great Again PAC, Ashkenazi Jew. Kushner, Senior Advisor, Donald J. Trump for President, Executive Committee Member, Trump Presidential Transition Team, Ashkenazi Jew. Yael Kushner, Ivanka Trump, Executive Vice President, the Trump Organization, Senior Advisor, Donald J. Trump for President, Executive Committee Member, Trump Presidential Transition Team, Orthodox Jewish Convert. Bennett LeBeau, Donor, Trump Victory Fund, Ashkenazi Jew. Richard Lesser, Member, President Trump's Strategic and Policy Forum, Ashkenazi Jew. Ronald Lieberman, Executive Vice President of Management and Development, the Trump Organization, Ashkenazi Jew. Howard Lorber, Donor, Trump Victory Fund, Member, Trump Economic Advisory Council, Ashkenazi Jew. David Malpass, Member, Trump Economic Advisory Council, Ashkenazi Jew. Douglas Manchester, Donor, Make America Great Again PAC, Ashkenazi Jew. Bernard Marcus, Endorser, Donald J. Trump for President, Donor, Rebuilding America Now PAC, Donor, Make America #1 PAC, Ashkenazi Jew. Rebecca Mercer, Donor, Make America #1 PAC, Executive Committee Member, Trump Presidential Transition Team, Ashkenazi Jew. Robert Mercer, Donor, Make America #1 PAC, Ashkenazi Jew. Amanda Miller, Vice President of Marketing, the Trump Organization, Ashkenazi Jew. Eli Miller, Chief Operating Officer, Donald J. Trump for President, Ashkenazi Jew. Jason Miller, Senior Communications Advisor, Donald J. Trump for President, Communications Director, Trump Presidential Transition Team, Communications Director and Assistant to the President, the White House, Ashkenazi Jew. Stephen Miller, National Policy Director, Donald J. Trump for President, National Policy Director, Trump Presidential Transition Team, Senior Advisor to the President for Policy, the White House, Ashkenazi Jew. Stephen Mnuchin, Donor, Trump Victory Fund, Member, Trump Economic Advisory Council, National Finance Chairman, Donald J. Trump for President, Executive Committee Member, Trump Presidential Transition Team, Secretary, United States Department of Treasury, Ashkenazi Jew. Elon Musk, Member, President Trump's Strategic and Policy Forum, Ashkenazi Jew. Samuel Nunberg, Former Policy Advisor, Donald J. Trump for President, Ashkenazi Jew. David Orwitz, Senior Vice President of Acquisitions and Development, the Trump Organization, Ashkenazi Jew. Jeffrey Palmer, Donor, Rebuilding America Now PAC, Ashkenazi Jew. Paulson, Donor, Trump Victory Fund, Member, Trump Economic Advisory Council, Ashkenazi Jew. Laura Perlmutter, Donor, Trump Victory Fund, Finance Vice Chairman, Trump Presidential Inaugural Committee, Ashkenazi Jew. Andrew Puzder, Secretary, United States Department of Labor, Ashkenazi Jew. Stuart Rauer, Endorser, Donald J. Trump for President, Ashkenazi Jew. Richard Roberts, Vice Chairman, Israel Advisory Committee for Donald Trump, Ashkenazi Jew. George Voss, Executive Vice President and Senior Counsel, the Trump Organization, Ashkenazi Jew. Wilbur Ross Jr., billionaire investor and former senior managing director of Rothschilds Incorporated for 25 years. Secretary of Commerce, donor, Trump Victory Fund. Member, Trump Economic Advisory Council. Secretary, United States Department of Commerce. Ashkenazi Jew. Stephen Roth, donor, Trump Victory Fund. Member, Trump Economic Advisory Council. Ashkenazi Jew. Keith Schiller, Director of Security, the Trump Organization. Ashkenazi Jew. Stephen Schwartzman, Chairman, President Trump's Strategic and Policy Forum. Ashkenazi Jew. Melvin Sembler, Vice Chairman, Trump Victory Committee. Finance Vice Chairman, Trump Presidential Inaugural Committee. Ashkenazi Jew. Yaakov Shahem, Endorser, Donald J. Trump for President. Donor, Trump Victory Fund. Ashkenazi Jew. Mark Short, Senior Advisor to Vice President-elect, Trump Presidential Transition Team. Ashkenazi Jew. Peter Thiel, Endorser, Donald J. Trump for President. Donor, Trump Victory Fund. Donor, Rebuilding America Now PAC. Donor, Make America #1 PAC. Executive Committee Member, Trump Presidential Transition Team. Ashkenazi Jew. Lara Trump, Endorser, Donald J. Trump for President. Ashkenazi Jew. Vanessa Trump, Endorser, Donald J. Trump for President. Ashkenazi Jew. Kevin Warsh, Member, President Trump's Strategic and Policy Forum. Ashkenazi Jew. Mark Weinberger, Member, President Trump's Strategic and Policy Forum. Ashkenazi Jew. Ronald Weiser, Vice Chairman, Trump Victory Committee. Finance Vice Chairman, Trump Presidential Inaugural Committee. Ashkenazi Jew. Andrew Weiss, Executive Vice President, the Trump Organization. Ashkenazi Jew. Alan Weisselberg, Executive Vice President and Chief Financial Officer, the Trump Organization. Ashkenazi Jew. Lawrence Weitzner, Advisor, Donald J. Trump for President. Ashkenazi Jew. Stephen Witkoff, Donor, Trump Victory Fund. Ashkenazi Jew. Stephen Wynn, Financial Vice Chairman, Trump Presidential Inaugural Committee. Ashkenazi Jew. Richard Lefrak, Donor, Trump Victory Fund. Ashkenazi Jew. Daniel Yergin, Member, President Trump's Strategic and Policy Forum. Ashkenazi Jew.
I'll leave links to that entire video by Truth Media Revolution, and I find it really, really convenient that after he made this video, his channel got attacked and threatened to be sued. Do you see what happens? Do you see what's really going on? Do you see what Donald Trump's main goal is and who his backers are? He's totally surrounded him with people that are not Americans. For someone that keeps yelling America first and that they want to eradicate the Muslim population, think about this. Think about this. This is all a trick. He didn't overcome the elites. One man could never overcome the elites because he doesn't have the money, the power, and the people to do it. He's the trump card. We're being played. Richie from Boston. All links will be in the description. I'm out.
You need the leadership to come from the very pinnacle, from the very top. And if it doesn't, it's not going to happen. And that's not happening now. It's not happening now. People aren't getting together.
I think the big problem this country has is being politically correct.
We have to stop illegal immigration. We have to. They love me, I love them. And I'll tell you something, if I get the nomination, I'll win the Latino vote. I will win it because I'm going to create jobs. Hillary Clinton is not going to be able to create jobs. We don't win anymore. We lose to China. We lose to Mexico, both in trade and at the border. We lose to everybody. I want to save the country. Our country's going to hell. The American dream is dead. I will bring it back bigger and better and stronger than ever before. I am officially running for President of the United States, and we are going to make our country great again. Bring back so much money and make our country so rich and great again. And I'm the only one that can do that. This country right now owes $19 trillion, and they need somebody like me to straighten out that mess. Strengthen our military and take care of our vets. This is a movement, folks. This is not like even maybe about me. This is about common sense. It's about doing the right thing. I think people are fed up with incompetent politicians that don't get things done. I'm telling you. I think they're fed up. But the silent majority is back, and we're going to take the country back.
Donald's great-grandparents, Christian Johannes Trump and Katharina Kober, had sons, Christian Frederick Trump and John G. Trump. Donald's great-grandmother, Katharina Kober, was of Jewish descent. The surname Kober is German and Ashkenazic Jew, a name derived from the personal name Jacob or Yaakov. Donald's grandparents lived in the Karlstadt, Pfalz, Rhineland area where they lived, and Germany comprised of Jewish communities from Mainz, Speyer and Worms. Germany became the center of Jewish life during medieval times. Donald Trump's daughter Ivanka and his 2 grandchildren are Jewish. Ivanka Trump converted to Judaism before marrying Jared Kushner, the son of New York Jewish real estate mogul Charles Kushner. She studied for her Orthodox conversion with Rabbi Haskell Lookstein of Manhattan's Teilat Jeshurun Synagogue, and the same Rabbi Lookstein officiated her wedding. Trump and Kushner are members of Lookstein's Orthodox Synagogue and are Shabbat observant.
Thank you so much. I want to thank my Jewish daughter. I have a Jewish daughter.
It all started with Trump's father, whose apparent ties with New Jersey real estate mogul Murray Kushner got the business going. Donald's daughter is now married to Jared Kushner and turned Jewish to get him.
So the Iranian deal is one of the worst contracts I've ever seen of any kind, nothing to do with countries or anything. It's the most incompetently drawn document I think I've ever seen. You know, there's a couple of clauses. First of all, the 24 days everyone knows, but that doesn't even start, you know, the inspection period. That doesn't even start. The clock could keep it much longer than 24 days. These guys could clean up and you wouldn't know a damn thing, despite what they tell you. But there's so many elements, but one of the elements when Tim mentions Israel, there's sort of a clause in there that nobody's really understanding, that if Iran gets attacked, we have to help them. Now you say, what if Israel attacks them? Are we supposed to be fighting Israel? This is the most incompetent agreement that anybody has ever seen.
We will protect Israel totally.
We love Israel. We will fight for Israel 100%, 1,000%. It will be there forever. Thank you.
With skyscrapers in his high-rising mind, young Donald set his sights on Manhattan, where Jewish sharks can send you packing. So he hired the well-connected and mobbed up Roy Cohn, a notorious Jewish homosexual, as legal counsel. Trump's all in now, since all those connections Cohn brought in keep the ante high. You don't become a Manhattan real estate mogul without seeding the kosher pot. Donald's hand now includes Alan Weisselberg as CFO and Michael Cohen as legal boss. No lightweights here when dealing with the sharks. Trump knows how Hymietown works.
I think Schumer, who I'm very close to Israel, but Schumer comes from New York, very close. I have a great relationship, far better than our president has, that I can tell you, but who doesn't? I think Schumer did it with a wink. Not a bad guy, smart guy. He used to be a friend of mine until I did this, and I said, look, all bets are rough. Look, I got to do what I have to do. I'm sorry. But I'll be able to get along with these people. You know, you got to be able to get along. You got to make deals. We can't always sign executive orders. The country wasn't based on executive orders. I mean, you got to get deals. So I pretty much believe, I mean, I really know the New York scene. I think they gave Schumer a little wave off. They said, look, you go ahead, oppose it, and this way you're friendly, and he has a large Jewish constituency, to put it mildly, the largest.
To put it very mildly, if Trump becomes pres, there's going to be lots of Jewish IOUs called in. You gotta make those deals. Take Carl Icahn, who bailed Trump out of his Taj Mahal bankruptcy. Hi, Donald. Carl Icahn here. Happy Passover, Carl. What can I do for you? Since it's Passover, I'm releasing you from that added loan. And by the way, I'm in a deal that involves Israel and need your help. Name it, Carl, and I'll get it done.
What do you think of the president's attitude towards Israel? Is he a friend of Israel?
No, I think he's one of the worst things that's ever happened to Israel. You look at what's going on, and I know Bibi very well. In fact, he asked me if I do a commercial for him. I think I'm the only so-called celebrity that did a commercial for him. And, you know, and it was a nice commercial and everything else, and I hope he's going to do great, and I think he's going to do great. But when you think about it, and I have so many friends of mine that contributed to the Obama campaign, I said that because they're so pro-Israel, I said, how can you contribute to the campaign? This guy is the worst thing that ever happened to Israel.
If Obama giving Israel $3 billion a year is the worst thing that ever happened to Israel, then imagine what Trump will do.
Donald Trump's mentor was Roy Cohn. Roy Cohn was the lawyer for the top mafia families of New York and Canada. Roy Cohn was a closet Jew and homosexual partner and friend of FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover. Roy Cohn ran the little boy's white male sex ring for the CIA. Felix Sater, whose father is a reputed Russian organized crime boss. Felix Sater is a top Bayrock executive in the Bayrock Group. Bayrock Group LLC was a real estate development firm that partnered with Trump on numerous projects after renting office space from the Trump Organization. Trump's close friend Roger Stone worked with Roy Cohn. Roger Stone and his wife were notorious for their swingers ads. Roger Stone defended his friend Roy Cohn, saying he was not a gay man, but a man who likes sex with men.
1. Trump's use of cocaine. Completely bogus. Did I ever attend parties where Donald Trump used cocaine? Folks, Donald Trump has never used drugs in his life. Lastly, she wanted to know, what about the reports that Donald Trump is gay?
Steve Wynn, the casino mogul, is one of Donald Trump's key campaign advisors. In his victory speech in Nevada, Donald Trump singled out Steve Wynn as someone who gives him advice. Wynn's late father, Michael Wynn, formerly Weinberg, ran his bingo parlor in Maryland under the auspices of Anthony Fat Tony. Stephen Wynn is connected to the mafia, pushing gambling in USA and London, UK. Rudy Giuliani works directly for the Russian mob. Giuliani closed down the local Italian-American mafias. This allowed foreign mafias to take over. These foreign mafias were Jewish and came from Russia and Israel. Rudy Giuliani is backing Donald Trump to become president. What do Donald Trump's lawyers and political advisors all have in common? They are Jewish and all connected to the Roman Jewish mafia. And Donald Trump has many more Jewish friends in his circle.
Huge buildings in New York, you have to do it with Federal Reserve notes. You have to do it but with borrowed Federal Reserve notes. And we now know that the Federal Reserve System took over when they took out Kennedy in 1963. The intelligence community involved with the Federal Reserve System, global elite money bankers. And if you're going to build big buildings in New York and around the world, you have to be involved in that system. I knew this. We tried to ignore it because Donald was talking so much good stuff that we forgot that he is involved with the cabal. Case in point, Felix Sater, the man on the right. You know that you've been hearing the stories all day. He's part of the could be involved with the mafia, Brighton Beach, Russian mafia, Jewish mafia. If you're going to build buildings, you have to have the mafia behind you in New York. That is a matter of fact. You crawl in bed with these people, you must know who you're crawling in bed with. And they don't forget about favors done. So yes, Felix Sater has done lots of work for the Donald. And the clip I'm about ready to show you is going to be even more stunning, because not only is Felix Sater working for the Donald, he's also working for the alphabets. And that should scare the hell out of you. So now we got the alphabets. Well, we always known that the alphabets worked with the mob.
Distinct pleasure of introducing the man of the year, Mr. Felix Sater. One fine day, 2.5 years ago, Felix invited me to join him at a private closed-door session in the Federal Building in New York. Only his immediate family members were allowed in, and he'd gotten special clearance for his rabbi to be there as well. I get there, and to my amazement, I see dozens of U.S. intelligence officers from all of the various three-letter intelligence agencies of this country, including some I had never even known existed. They're taking turns standing up one after the other, offering praise for Felix, praising him as an American hero for his work and his assistance in the highest levels of this country's national security interests. They were speaking about Felix Sater.
The story is of Felix Sater. Seder in his rise to power. Born in the Soviet Union in 1966, Felix Sater immigrated with his family to Brighton Beach when he was 8 years old. At 24, he was a successful Wall Street broker. And at 27, he was in prison after a bloody bar fight. And at 32, he was accused of conspiring with the mafia to launder money and defraud investors.
Donald Trump's grandparents were related. Reportedly, Trump's grandfather married his former neighbor, Elizabeth Christ. So, they said. However, it appears that Elizabeth, born October 10, 1880, was really the daughter of Christ and Anna Maria Rethon. Christ was Fred's uncle, his father's brother. Fred married his own niece.
You've looked into this is based on the fact that they're upholding practices from the Talmud which are abhorrent to the Torah and the teachings of Moses. They're utterly diametrically opposed, and they would, in the religious dimension, would be described as satanic.
And that's really my whole goal, is to expose Zionism, the synagogue of Satan, which the Bible reveals is mystery, Babylon the Great, mother of harlots.
Most of the Jews in Israel today, the Talmud Satan worshippers over there, are not real Jews. And people ask me, well, who's a Jew? Who are the real Jews? And you know what? It's so that doesn't even matter today, because the bloodline thing of Israel was demolished when the Lord died on the cross and rose again.
Next guest was used also in worshiping the devil, participated in human sacrifice rituals and cannibalism. She says her family has been involved in rituals for generations.
That Jesus himself experienced some of this conduct firsthand, and he referred to them as, the synagogue of Satan.
So we shouldn't even call these so-called Jewish clergymen, we shouldn't even call them rabbi. I call them rabbi as a term of derision or scorn, because they certainly weren't rabbi to Jesus, and never once did he call anybody in the Bible. There's never one example of Jesus calling a man rabbi, ever.
There is one group inside of Judaism which goes back all that way to the time of Jesus, peace be upon him and his mother, which is very clearly satanic in that they recognize the concept of Satan, a dark force, a dark being leading dark forces, and that he is their hero.
Does everyone else think it's a nice Jewish family? From the outside, you appear to be a nice Jewish girl. Definitely. And you all are worshiping the devil inside the home?
Right. There's other Jewish families across the country. It's not just my own family.
I asked him, what does the Bible mean when it says in Revelation 2 and Revelation 3 that in the last days the most wicked and evil force on earth, one that will persecute Christians and bring death and bloodshed to the whole world, is the synagogue of Satan?
One of the things I want to bring up here is their preoccupation with murdering large numbers of non-Jews, or as they refer to us as goyim cattle. They take great pride and great pleasure in the destruction and murder of large numbers.
The rabbis were all promoted and became commissars and head of concentration camps. Yep. Most of the concentration camps were headed by Jews, and a number of the commissars or commandants of the Soviet Gulag camps were rabbis.
What kinds of things? You don't have to give us the gory details, but what kinds of things went on in the family?
Well, there would be rituals in which babies would be sacrificed, and you would have to,
babies.
Witness the sacrifice. Right. When I was very young, I was forced to participate in that, in which I had to sacrifice an infant.
And the purpose of sacrifice is to what? Is to bring you what? What are you sacrificing for?
For power.
Christ also called the Pharisees adulterers.
an adulterous generation. The Talmud provides generous loopholes for adultery. It says the penalty for adultery does not include sex with a minor, the wife of a minor, or the wife of a heathen. The Talmud also encourages seduction of unwed adolescent girls called designated bondmaids. But it's important how such rapes are performed. With the designated bondmaid, one is guilty only in the case of natural connection, but not in the case of perverse connection. The Pharisees reasoned that rape in a perverted manner is outside the jurisdiction of the law. Normal rape, however, was punishable. In Babylon, sexual perversion of every kind had been a way of life for millenniums. The Pharisees were deeply influenced by such practices.
In 3 of the major treatises of the Talmud are found extensive passages which give legal endorsement to seduce and marry 3-year-old baby girls. In fact, many of the greatest rabbis of the Talmud, including Simeon ben Yochai, upheld this privilege. Today in Israel, thousands of Jews go to Meron every year to venerate the memory of Simeon ben Yochai, one of the most respected rabbis in the history of Judaism.
In one of dozens of endorsements of child sex, Simeon ben Yochai said, "A proselyte under the age of 3 years and a day is permitted to marry a priest." Agreeing with ben Yochai, the great Rabbah said, "When a grown-up man has intercourse with a little girl, it is nothing, for when the girl is less than this, 3 years and a day, it is as if one put the finger into the eye." The footnote to this passage says, "As tears come to the eye again and again, so does virginity come back to the little girl under 3 years." The same section confirms that sexual activity with small boys is in the same category. The intercourse of a small boy is not regarded as a sexual act.
And even starred as himself in an episode of Sex and the City. Just to add on, it says here Trump is a member of the Screen Actors Guild and receives over $110,000 pension every year. Why on earth they give a billionaire this is beyond me. A couple of years ago, Trump was taken to court over rape and assault allegations involving him and his ex-wife Ivana Zelnikova. Everything that supposedly happened was documented in a book by Harry Hurt called Lost Tycoon: The Many Lives of Donald J. Trump. I will read some of the excerpt to you guys now. If you don't want to listen, just skip the next 30 seconds or so. Suddenly, according to Ivana, the Donald storms into the room. I'm sorry, but why the hell is he referred to as the Donald? But anyway, he is cursing out loud. "Your fucking doctor has ruined my bald patch." The Donald flings Ivana down onto the bed, then he pins back her arms and grabs her by the hair. The part of her head he is grabbing corresponds to the spot on his head where the scalp reduction operation has been done. The Donald starts ripping out Ivana's hair by the handful, as if he is trying to make her feel the same kind of pain he is feeling. He rips off her clothes and unzips her pants. Then he jams his inside her for the first time in more than 16 months. It is a violent assault. According to the versions she repeats to some of her closest friends, "He raped me." When the Donald finally pulls out, Ivana jumps up from the bed and runs upstairs to her mother's room. She locks the door and stays there crying for the rest of the night.
Don't hurt me no more.
Number 7. So, it seems that Donald Trump has a thing for his daughter, Ivanka Trump. First off, in 2006, he was on The View and was asked how he would feel if Ivanka posed for Playboy. His response was, "I don't think Ivanka would do that, although she does have a very nice figure."
If they were using her to...
I don't think Ivanka would do that inside the magazine, although she does have a very nice figure. I've said that if Ivanka weren't my daughter, perhaps I'd be dating her. You know?
Stop it! Oh, it's so weird! Stop You know what? You are sick.
Yeah. Terrible.
Yeah. Well, you're known for saying outrageous things.
Also, in a recent edition of Rolling Stone, Trump said this about Ivanka. "Yeah, she's really something, and what a beauty, that one. If I weren't happily married and, you know, her father..."
We war not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers and the rulers of the darkness of this world and spiritual wickedness that's up in high places.
So this is called the snake. On her way to work one morning, down the path along the lake, a tender-hearted woman saw a poor, half-frozen snake. His pretty-colored skin had been all frosted with the dew. "Oh, well," she cried, "I'll take you in, and I'll take care of you. Take me in, O tender woman. Take me in for heaven's sake. Take me in, O tender woman," sighed the broken snake. She wrapped him up all cozy in a curvature of silk, and then laid him by the fireside with honey and some milk. Now she hurried home from work that night. As soon as she arrived, she found that pretty snake she'd taken and revived. "Take me in, O tender woman, take me in for heaven's sake. Take me in, O tender woman," sighed the broken snake. Now she clutched him to her bosom. "You're so beautiful," she cried, "but if I hadn't brought you in by now, you might have died." Now she stroked his pretty skin, and then she kissed him and held him tight. But instead of saying thank you, that snake gave her a vicious bite. "Take me in, O tender woman. Take me in for heaven's sake. Take me in, O tender woman," sighed the broken snake. "I saved you," cried the woman, "and you've bitten me. Heavens, why? You know your bite is poisonous, and now I'm going to die." "Oh, shut up, silly woman," said the reptile with a grin.
"You knew damn well I was a snake before you took me in."
There was one thing that you wanted people to remember about Donald Trump. What is it?
Donald Trump is gay.
There is absolutely no doubt that Donald Trump is supported, owned, and operated by the Zionist Jew power structure. It is a verifiable fact. It is a fact the mainstream media and mainstream alternative media alike will dare not touch. Anyone ignoring this fact and not exposing this is either incredibly naive or bought and paid for to sell you disinformation. Donald Trump is absolutely surrounded by and has appointed psychopathic neocons and Rothschild Zionists, yet many are in delusion and denial, largely in part due to their desperate desire for a savior, and this is what the elite have counted on. It is through this desperation and demoralization of a collective consciousness, sick and tired of a corrupt system and government, they were able to once again pull off another dog and pony show and manipulate people into believing that once again, things could be different this time. Through the obsolete and meaningless system of voting. Hope and Change 2.0. Unfortunately, this is just another case of meet the new boss, same as the old boss. We are led to believe that Trump is at war with the mainstream media and the establishment, a mainstream media that is mainly Zionist, Jewish owned and operated, another verifiable fact. Trump is also surrounded and supported by an endless stream of Ashkenazi Jews in his organizations and administration. He is, of course, a quote-unquote lifelong supporter and true friend of Israel, the largest terrorist state in the world. Sadly, most people do not realize that Israel and Mossad intelligence were key players in carrying out 9/11. If Trump truly was for the people, he would help expose the stranglehold of Israel and the Zionist power structure. Keep in mind, the Israel of the Bible is a completely different entity than the modern United Nations created state of Israel, which is a terrorist state of the New World Order. This is a distinction many indoctrinated Christians fail to grasp. America is just a puppet regime of Israel and Zion. A small fraction of the population are finally discovering that this Zionist apparatus controls our Federal Reserve System, corporations, Hollywood, and our media, and have our politicians in their back pockets. An even smaller fraction of the population understands that Trump would never get to where he is if he weren't owned and operated by these same powers. And as they say, the proof is in the pudding. In addition to Trump being a staunch Zionist supporter, all one needs to do is look at who surrounds and supports Donald Trump. Then you will understand how the media versus Trump narrative is just another ruse in Zionist script. The scripted battle between Trump and the Jewish-owned media was the key chessboard move to legitimizing Trump in the eyes of the demoralized populace. a demoralized populace who by now has little to no trust for the so-called dinosaur media. The idea that Trump is at war with a Jewish-owned media, while simultaneously surrounded and supported by an army of them, is as ridiculous and absurd as it can get, and isn't remotely believable to anyone aware of who really owns the media. Many have also been fooled into believing Trump has hinted at 9/11 truth, but this is nothing more than laughable to any real 9/11 researcher. What he has stated publicly on 9/11 thus far has been nothing but lies and misdirection. In addition to being friends with 9/11 perp Rudy Giuliani, Trump has focused on the limited hangout and misdirection angle of Saudi Arabia, which is what gatekeepers, disinfo agents, and the media focuses on, ignoring the huge elephant in the room, Israel. Trump has publicly stated that he saw quote-unquote thousands of Muslim Americans celebrating the 9/11 attacks in New Jersey, which is the biggest lie imaginable. The real truth Trump or your mainstream media will never mention is the only people actually documented celebrating the 9/11 event were a small handful of undercover Israeli Mossad agents who had been in the US for months and some for years, whose operation was busted by a nationwide FBI sting and were captured on the George Washington Bridge with explosives in their van of their front company, Urban Moving Systems.
Favoring the reports we're getting now, 2 or 3 men arrested on the New Jersey Parkway. Deborah, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. That is the information that I'm getting from 2 sources, that there was a van either on the New Jersey Turnpike or the Garden State Parkway, and that it was near the George Washington Bridge. There were 2 or 3 men who were in the van. The van was pulled over. It is not clear why the van was pulled over, but when it was, law enforcers found tons of explosives inside of the van. That is right now all I'm hearing, but again, 2 to 3 people in custody, and we are trying to get more information on that right now.
And word late tonight that 2 suspects are in FBI custody after a truckload of explosives was discovered around the George Washington Bridge. That bridge links New York to New Jersey over the Hudson River. Whether the discovery of those explosives has anything to do with other events of the day is unclear, but the FBI has 2 suspects in hand, said the truck load of explosives, enough explosives were in the truck to do great damage to the George Washington Bridge. But they arrested the 2 suspects and they're questioning them as we speak.
Since 9/11, we have thousands of pages of FBI, CIA, and DOJ reports documenting the arrests made on 9/11. The FBI report outlines the fact that the dancing Israelis were found to have taken 76 photographs, had maps, plane tickets, box cutters, and almost $5,000 in cash. In their 2004 civil lawsuit, the Israeli plaintiffs demanded their possessions and money back, in addition to many other demands. The declassified FBI reports also outlined the little-known fact that additional Israelis driving vans were arrested by police in Ohio, Pennsylvania, and New Hampshire after the 9/11 attack. Numerous trucks and vans with explosives were stopped by police on 9/11. And, as outlandish and unbelievable as it may sound, one of the vans had a mural painted on the side of it depicting a plane crashing into the Twin Towers. This is confirmed by 2 sources. 1, the New York Police radio transmission recordings from the day of 9/11. 2, it was also discussed by U.S. Transportation Secretary Norman Mineta himself in his February 2006 official report titled Saving City Lifelines, Lessons Learned in the 9/11 Terrorist Attacks. The report stated, quote, "There were continuing moments of alarm. A panel truck with a painting of a plane flying into the World Trade Center was stopped near the temporary command post. It proved to be rented to a group of ethnic Middle Eastern people who did not speak English. Fearing that it might be a truck bomb, the NYPD immediately evacuated the area, called out the bomb squad, and detained the occupants until a thorough search was made. The vehicle was found to be an innocent delivery truck." End quote. The report, of course, makes absolutely no mention of the truck exploding or the fact that these Middle Eastern people had actually been Israeli spies.
Spencer, I got a message on that plane. It's a big truck with a mural painted of an airplane diving into New York City and exploding. I don't know what's in the truck. The truck is in between 6th and 7th on King Street.
All right, 10-4, I'll send the issue in the bomb squad there for Westgate.
The van? With a mural painted, airplane diving into New York, blowing up. 2 men got out of the truck. ran away from it. We got those two under. That's good. And you got those, are you holding those two guys, Kate?
I've got so many questions, but you are vindicated. This has got to be the 50th time the last 6 months on the radical Muslims celebrating, not just in New Jersey, but New York, Palestine, all over. What do you have to say? They're still attacking you, though we've got Dan Rather on video, we've got New York Post, we've got Washington Post, we've got, I mean, what's going on here? On the radical Muslims celebrating, not just in New Jersey, but New York, Palestine, all over. What do you have to say? They're still attacking you, though we've got Dan Rather on video, we've got New York Post, we've got Washington Post, we've got, I mean, what's going on here?
Well, I took a lot of heat, and I was very strong on
Of course, even though Israel's involvement in 9/11 is now documented, proven, and verifiable fact, this information has been well swept under the radar. Most Americans will never realize what took place regarding the many Israeli spies arrested and detained on 9/11, only to be later released and sent back to Israel. This information will never be mentioned or covered by the mainstream media, let alone Donald Trump, and that is because he is obviously in bed with Israel and the Mossad. Michael Aboud, Communications Coordinator, Donald J. Trump for President, Sephardic Jew. Paul Eschleitner, Chairman, Supervisory Board, Deutsche Bank, Donald Trump's largest lender, Ashkenazi Jew. Miriam Adelson, Endorser, Donald J. Trump for President, Donor, Future 45 PAC, Finance Vice Chairman, Trump Presidential Inaugural Committee, Ashkenazi Jew. Sheldon Adelson, Endorser, Donald J. Trump for President, Donor, Future 45 PAC, Finance Vice Chairman, Trump Presidential Inaugural Committee, Ashkenazi Jew. Paul Atkins, Member, President Trump's Strategic and Policy Forum, Ashkenazi Jew. Brian Ballard, Finance Vice Chairman, Trump Presidential Inaugural Committee, Ashkenazi Jew. Elliot Broidy, Vice Chairman, Trump Victory Committee, Finance Vice Chairman, Trump Presidential Inaugural Committee, Ashkenazi Jew. Safra Katz, Executive Committee Member, Trump Presidential Transition Team, Ashkenazi Jew. Michael Cohen, Executive Vice President and Special Counsel, the Trump Organization, Ashkenazi Jew. Gary Cohn, Director, United States National Economic Council, Ashkenazi Jew. Delos Cosgrove, Member, President Trump's Strategic and Policy Forum, Ashkenazi Jew. Gil Deser, President, Trump Desert Development, Ashkenazi Jew. Michael Deser, Founder, Trump Desert Development, Ashkenazi Jew. Louis Eisenberg, Chairman, Trump Victory Committee, Finance Co-Chairman, Trump Presidential Inaugural Committee, Ashkenazi Jew. Boris Epstein, Senior Advisor, Donald J. Trump for President, Ashkenazi Jew. Stephen Feinberg, Donor, Trump Victory Fund, Member, Trump Economic Advisory Council, Ashkenazi Jew. Lawrence Fink, Member, President Trump's Strategic and Policy Forum, Ashkenazi Jew. Alan Fishman, Chairman, Ladder Capital, Donald Trump's second largest lender, Ashkenazi Jew. David Friedman, Co-Chairman, Israel Advisory Committee for Donald Trump, United States Ambassador to Israel, Ashkenazi Jew. Samuel Fox, Vice Chairman, Trump Victory Committee, Ashkenazi Jew. Alan Garten, Executive Vice President and General Counsel, the Trump Organization, Ashkenazi Jew. Bruce Gelb, Endorser, Donald J. Trump for President, Ashkenazi Jew. Michael Glassner, Deputy Campaign Manager and National Political Director, Donald J. Trump for President, Special Advisor for Operations, Trump Presidential Transition Team, Ashkenazi Jew. Lawrence Glick, Executive Vice President of Strategic Development, the Trump Organization, Ashkenazi Jew. Jason Greenblatt, Executive Vice President and Chief Legal Officer, the Trump Organization, Co-Chairman, Israel Advisory Committee for Donald J. Trump, President Trump's Special Representative for International Negotiations, Ashkenazi Jew. Vincent Harris, former Digital Strategy Manager, Donald J. Trump for President, Ashkenazi Jew. Thomas Hicks Sr., Finance Vice Chairman, Trump Presidential Inaugural Committee, Ashkenazi Jew. Carl Icahn, Endorser, Donald J. Trump for President, Special Advisor to the President for Regulatory Reform, Ashkenazi Jew. Gail Icahn, Finance Vice Chairman, Trump Presidential Inaugural Committee, Ashkenazi Jew. Robert Eager, Member, President Trump's Strategic and Policy Forum, Ashkenazi Jew. Travis Kalanick, Member, President Trump's Strategic and Policy Forum, Ashkenazi Jew. Peter Calico, Donor, Trump Victory Fund, Ashkenazi Jew. Daniel Kowalski, Deputy Policy Director, Donald J. Trump for President, Member, Trump Economic Advisory Council, Ashkenazi Jew. Charles Kushner, Endorser, Donald J. Trump for President, Donor, Make America Great Again PAC, Ashkenazi Jew. Jared Kushner, Senior Advisor, Donald J. Trump for President, Executive Committee Member, Trump Presidential Transition Team, Ashkenazi Jew. Yael Kushner, Ivanka Trump, Executive Vice President, The Trump Organization, Senior Advisor, Donald J. Trump for President, Executive Committee Member, Trump Presidential Transition Team, Orthodox Jewish Convert. Bennett LeBeau, Donor, Trump Victory Fund, Ashkenazi Jew. Richard Lesser, Member, President Trump's Strategic and Policy Forum, Ashkenazi Jew. Ronald Lieberman, Executive Vice President of Management and Development, The Trump Organization, Ashkenazi Jew. Howard Lorber, Donor, Trump Victory Fund, Member, Trump Economic Advisory Council, Ashkenazi Jew. David Malpass, Member, Trump Economic Advisory Council, Ashkenazi Jew. Douglas Manchester, Donor, Make America Great Again PAC, Ashkenazi Jew. Bernard Marcus, Endorser, Donald J. Trump for President, Donor, Rebuilding America Now PAC, Donor, Make America #1 PAC, Ashkenazi Jew. Rebecca Mercer, Donor, Make America #1 PAC, Executive Committee Member, Trump Presidential Transition Team, Ashkenazi Jew. Robert Mercer, Donor, Make America #1 PAC, Ashkenazi Jew. Amanda Miller, Vice President of Marketing, The Trump Organization, Ashkenazi Jew. Eli Miller, Chief Operating Officer, Donald J. Trump for President, Ashkenazi Jew. Jason Miller, Senior Communications Advisor, Donald J. Trump for President, Communications Director, Trump Presidential Transition Team, Communications Director and Assistant to the President, the White House, Ashkenazi Jew. Stephen Miller, National Policy Director, Donald J. Trump for President, National Policy Director, Trump Presidential Transition Team, Senior Advisor to the President for Policy, the White House, Ashkenazi Jew. Stephen Mnuchin, Donor, Trump Victory Fund, Member, Trump Economic Advisory Council, National Finance Chairman, Donald J. Trump for President, Executive Committee Member, Trump Presidential Transition Team, Secretary, United States Department of Treasury, Ashkenazi Jew. Elon Musk, Member, President Trump's Strategic and Policy Forum, Ashkenazi Jew. Samuel Nunberg, Former Policy Advisor, Donald J. Trump for President, Ashkenazi Jew. David Orowitz, Senior Vice President of Acquisitions and Development, The Trump Organization, Ashkenazi Jew. Jeffrey Palmer, Donor, Rebuilding America Now PAC, Ashkenazi Jew. John Paulson, Donor, Trump Victory Fund, Member, Trump Economic Advisory Council, Ashkenazi Jew. Laura Perlmutter, Donor, Trump Victory Fund, Finance Vice Chairman, Trump Presidential Inaugural Committee, Ashkenazi Jew. Andrew Puzder, Secretary, United States Department of Labor, Ashkenazi Jew. Stuart Rauer, Endorser, Donald J. Trump for President, Ashkenazi Jew. Richard Roberts, Vice Chairman, Israel Advisory Committee for Donald Trump, Ashkenazi Jew. George Ross, Executive Vice President and Senior Counsel, The Trump Organization, Ashkenazi Jew. Wilbur Ross Jr., billionaire investor and former Senior Managing Director of Rothschilds Incorporated for 25 years, Secretary of Commerce, Donor, Trump Victory Fund, Member, Trump Economic Advisory Council, Secretary, United States Department of Commerce, Ashkenazi Jew. Stephen Roth, Donor, Trump Victory Fund, Member, Trump Economic Advisory Council, Ashkenazi Jew. Keith Schiller, Director of Security, The Trump Organization, Ashkenazi Jew. Stephen Schwartzman, Chairman, President Trump's Strategic and Policy Forum, Ashkenazi Jew. Melvin Sembler, Vice Chairman, Trump Victory Committee, Finance Vice Chairman, Trump Presidential Inaugural Committee, Ashkenazi Jew. Yaakov Shahem, Endorser, Donald J. Trump for President, Donor, Trump Victory Fund, Ashkenazi Jew. Mark Short, Senior Advisor to Vice President-elect, Trump Presidential Transition Team, Ashkenazi Jew. Peter Thiel, Endorser, Donald J. Trump for President, Donor, Trump Victory Fund, Donor, Rebuilding America Now PAC, Donor, Make America #1 PAC, Executive Committee Member, Trump Presidential Transition Team, Ashkenazi Jew. Lara Trump, Endorser, Donald J. Trump for President, Ashkenazi Jew. Vanessa Trump, Endorser, Donald J. Trump for President, Ashkenazi Jew. Kevin Warsh, Member, President Trump's Strategic and Policy Forum, Ashkenazi Jew. Mark Weinberger, Member, President Trump's Strategic and Policy Forum, Ashkenazi Jew. Ronald Weiser, Vice Chairman, Trump Victory Committee, Finance Vice Chairman, Trump Presidential Inaugural Committee, Ashkenazi Jew. Andrew Weiss, Executive Vice President, the Trump Organization, Ashkenazi Jew. Alan Weisselberg, Executive Vice President and Chief Financial Officer, the Trump Organization, Ashkenazi Jew. Lawrence Weitzner, Advisor, Donald J. Trump for President, Ashkenazi Jew. Stephen Witkoff, Donor, Trump Victory Fund, Ashkenazi Jew. Stephen Wynn, Financial Vice Chairman, Trump Presidential Inaugural Committee, Ashkenazi Jew. Richard Lefrak, Donor, Trump Victory Fund, Ashkenazi Jew. Daniel Yergin, Member, President Trump's Strategic and Policy Forum, Ashkenazi Jew. So now you can see how absurd the notion that the Jewish-owned media really hates Donald Trump when they actually love him. Take CNN for example, all Jewish-owned and run. The major shareholder for CNN is Aviv Nevo, an Israeli billionaire venture capitalist. Head of CNN is Zionist Jeff Zucker, along with the many Zionist Jew propagandists such as Jake Tapper, Wolf Blitzer, Larry King, and many more. But you get the point. The reason the media has been quote-unquote against Donald Trump is because that was the Zionist script that has been written. This glaring contradiction is how you can see through this elaborate charade and deception of Trump, the so-called anti-establishment figure. Now you know when you see him call out CNN or any other mainstream media outlet, it is a ruse and nothing more than Zionist scripted entertainment and distraction for a dumbed down and ignorant populace. The bottom line is, you cannot be anti-establishment, anti-globalist, and be pro-Zionist, pro-Israel. This is the real truth. And until we see otherwise, nothing will ever change.
It is time to drain the swamp in Washington, D.C. Her papers went out to all her friends at the banks, Goldman Sachs, and everybody else.
President-elect Donald Trump turned to former Goldman Sachs banker and movie financier Steve Mnuchin to be the next Treasury Secretary.
We're working on the economic plan and the transition, making sure we get the biggest tax bill passed.
The 53-year-old was Trump's campaign finance chief, building a network of donors to support Mr. Trump's general election campaign. Mr. Mnuchin has strong ties to Wall Street after a 17-year career at Goldman Sachs, where he pioneered block trading, the selling of big chunks of shares at once. Mr. Mnuchin was born to a Jewish family in 1962, and his father also worked at Goldman Sachs.
It's official. President-elect Donald Trump has picked Gary Cohn to head the National Economic Council. Gary Cohn's also going to be an assistant to the president for economic policy. If you've been watching CNBC, you already knew this because we've been reporting this for what feels like days, but now it is. We will miss Gary at Goldman Sachs, but I believe the American people and the president-elect are fortunate that he has chosen to serve his country. I am confident that Gary will bring his many talents and expertise to the White House and will do his part to make our economy stronger for all Americans. That coming from Lloyd Blankfein, the CEO of Goldman Sachs.
It's just awfully good that someone with the temperament of Donald Trump is not in charge of the law in our country.
Because you'd be in jail. I didn't think I'd say this, but I'm going to say it. And I hate to say it. But if I win, I am going to instruct my Attorney General to get a special prosecutor to look into your situation.
Everything he just said is absolutely false.
Hillary has worked very long and very hard over a long period of time. And we owe her a major debt of gratitude for her service to our country. I mean that very sincerely.
Are you going to ask for a special prosecutor to investigate Hillary Clinton over her emails?
Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to think about it. She did some bad things. I mean, she did some bad things.
A special prosecutor?
I don't want to hurt them. I don't want to hurt them. They're good people.
Hillary Clinton, commonly referred to as Crooked Hillary. She's crooked as a $3 bill.
She's married to an abuser, a woman claimed rape and all sorts of things. I mean, horrible things.
She should be in prison.
She's the queen of corruption.
She's a disaster. She is a dangerous liar. She's the devil.
She's a monster. Hillary Clinton, I think, is a terrific woman. I mean, I'm a little biased because I've known her for years. I live in New York. She lives in New York. And I've known her and her husband for years, and I really like them both a lot. And I think she really works hard. And I think she, again, she's given an agenda. It's not all of her, but I think she really works hard, and I think she does a good job. I just like her. I like her, and I like her husband. You'll be looking at the record of Hillary Clinton, and how did she do as Secretary of State? Probably above and beyond everybody else and everything else.
Hello and welcome to Press TV's Debate. I'm Marcia Hashmi. Thanks so much for being with us. BBC, CNN, and the New York Times and others are all fake news and the enemy of the people. This is according to U.S. President Donald Trump. Representatives of these organizations were barred from entering a White House press briefing. Now, the New York Times has called this an insult to democratic ideals. Well, what do you think? Stay with us as we take a look at all of this on this debate.
No end in sight to the war between US President Donald Trump and the media. This war intensified on Friday after the US president once again condemned the media outlets on his blacklist as fake news and an enemy of the people. Two derogatory phrases he has time and again used to batter the news organizations with which he has been at loggerheads during his month-long presidency and before taking the helm as president.
A few days ago, I called the fake news the enemy of the people, and they are. They are the enemy of the people.
Hours after his tirade, the White House barred several major news organizations from a press briefing. Reporters from the BBC, CNN, the New York Times, and several other news outlets were denied access to the briefing by US Press Secretary Sean Spicer. The Associated Press and Time magazine chose not to participate, even though they were granted entry. Meanwhile, journalists from several right-leaning news channels were allowed into Spicer's briefing, including NBC, ABC, CBS, and Fox News. The New York Times angrily reacted to the ban on the journalists' attendance at the news conference, saying nothing like this has ever happened at the White House. The Times called the move an unmistakable insult to democratic ideals. Meanwhile, CNN described it as an unacceptable development by the Trump White House. And the Committee to Protect Journalists also condemned the White House's move and expressed its concerns. Trump's row with the media started from his first days of campaign. He promised to open up America's libel laws to make it easier for him to sue news outlets who produce what he called misleading stories.
I think it's great that he's going after the mainstream media because this is the mouthpiece of the global oligarchy, especially the BBC and the New York Times and these types of organizations that pretty much socially engineer the world through propaganda.
The US president has repeatedly tweeted against the media and called them liars. In a recent tweet, Trump spelled out exactly who his targets are when he talks about fake news. He described a series of America's most famous broadsheet newspapers and 3 major TV networks as enemies of the people. Since day one of his campaign, when he announced his intention to become America's president, the media kept challenging Trump, asking questions and demanding an explanation for every single comment that he made. But as time passed, this turned into a war, and it seems that following Friday's media ban, the battle between the US president and those who he calls the fake news has entered a new phase.
Are you a friendly reporter? Watch how friendly.
Well, let's welcome my guest to the program from the columnist, a columnist from The Hill, Mr. Brent Bodowsky. Out of Washington, D.C., an investigative journalist, Mr. Tony Gosling out of Bristol. Welcome, both of you, to the program. Well, let's start this off in D.C. and Mr. Bodowsky, definitely interesting times. Now, your take on all this, calling these news outlets enemies of the people and fake news. What do you think of the U.S. president's claims?
Well, I think they're nonsense. I should tell the audience that the Hill newspaper, where I write a column for, was one of those newspapers that was not allowed into the briefing. We're in good company. I think the problem is that Trump doesn't like what the news is reporting, and he doesn't like the negative effect that it's having on his public relations and on his approval rating, which is very, very low. I predict that sometime by the beginning or middle of next week, on the matter of excluding reporters, I predict the president and his press secretary, Mr. Spicer, will see the light and will have a happy ending, and everybody will be back in the briefings. I do think it is both dangerous and counterproductive to Trump and to any president to declare a holy war against the American media. The last president who tried anything like that was President Richard Nixon, and his presidency did not have a good ending.
All right, Mr. Gosling, isn't it true that it is easy for the mainstream media to actually control the narrative because just 6 corporations own 90% of mainstream media entities? Isn't this in itself dangerous for free and accurate dissemination of information?
Well, look, the mainstream press here in the West has got a tremendous amount of problems. Yes, it's in a tiny number of hands. Often reporters and journalists who ask awkward questions are simply elbowed out of the way, and you end up with quite a supine press who just ask soft questions. But what here is happening is Trump is accusing the people that don't agree with him of being fake news. It is, as the other correspondent said, this is a very dangerous move, very counterproductive move. In fact, in a way, I think Trump has shot himself in the foot here. Great to see Associated Press. In fact, when I saw that, I cheered. Associated Press and Time saying, actually, if you're going to start excluding the eyes and the ears of millions of people around the world from your press briefings, then we're not interested in your press briefings. And it would be nice to see the other organizations, the big US TV networks, for example, that are in these briefings, boycott them too. You know, there is I think a very important role that these briefings have around the world. And yes, there are flaws with many of the press, but what Trump's done here is, I think, absolutely outrageous. And these people are right to boycott them. I mean, for example, under Obama, we had Russia Today's Gana Chichikyan in the White House asking all the most awkward, difficult questions of the White House press secretaries, but they were all absolutely up to answering them. And if you start ending up with a White House press briefing where the spokespeople are not answering, or don't have the courage to answer difficult questions from press they don't agree with, then we're taking this whole business down a very, very dangerous road. And an example, it shows really that Trump is from the corporate world. Big corporations do this all the time. They exclude reporters because they don't like, and it's a way of sort of punishing certain networks if they've said something bad about that corporation. But this is totally unacceptable. You know, he's supposed to be representing 320 million Americans, not some kind of Trump Tower corporation.
Okay, well, Mr. Budowski, Donald Trump's chief strategist, Stephen Bannon, has said that, quote, the corporatist, globalist media is adamantly opposed to an economic nationalist agenda like Donald Trump has. What do you make of that statement?
I wish we had an hour. First of all, number one, I do think there is a valid issue, setting aside Steve Bannon, with corporate concentrated ownership of media. I have been concerned about that for some time. I think from the beginning of this campaign in 2016, I publicly criticized the media for giving Donald Trump too much coverage during the Republican primaries and for not giving Bernie Sanders any coverage until he got so much popularity they had to cover him. So there is a valid concern. As far as what Bannon is saying, I don't think anybody that works for Donald Trump should be talking about corporatism from anybody else. I'll tell you that. If we had a 2-hour show, I could tell you the swamp of corporate interests that are all over the Trump presidency. And there have been too much of that under presidencies of both parties. But no, the idea that the media is out to get Trump simply isn't true. The media is out to publicize Trump because they think it's good for ratings.
Well, let me just jump in here, Mr. Budowski. Let me just jump in here. You said that the media is definitely not out to get Trump. If we look at Donald Trump, the run-up to his actual presidency, during the election campaign, we saw some very aggressive coverage. For example, entities such as CNN, there would be 5 and 6 journalists actually interviewing someone who was pro-Trump. Do you think that was at all a little not balanced, imbalanced, or was that just regular journalism as it has become today?
Well, that is regular journalism, for better and for worse, no doubt about it. Let me give a very specific example of how this works in the real world, in brief. Not long ago, when Michael Flynn was the president's national security advisor, he denied that he had had any conversations with the Russian ambassador about sanctions. Okay? He said he didn't do it. Everybody believed him at that point. It was then reported in the Washington Post that he did have those conversations and that they did involve sanctions, at which point he admitted he did. Vice President Pence, Trump's vice president, was angry at him for not telling the truth, and he was forced to resign. Now, if the media did not report that, did not report the fact and the truth that they did have those conversations, which Flynn was denying, he may still be in office today. So I understand why politicians can get angry at the press. Look, in brief, I worked for Democratic leaders for a long part of my life, and that's like the White House staff and Congress is what I was doing. And yeah, when we didn't like what a reporter did, say from the New York Times, the way we would punish them, to be honest, is I'd give the next 3 stories to the Washington Post, and they would take the hint. I would never bar them from talking to us. I would never call them against America or against the people. I would never do that kind of thing. Okay. I don't believe in censorship. I don't believe in that kind of an attack, and I think Trump is going to regret it. And many Republicans, by the way, in Congress totally agree with what I'm saying right now.
Okay. Well, Tony Gosling, is this banning certain media representative an attack on democracy, or is it an attack on the global oligarchy, as some analysts are claiming?
Actually, I think it's a tantrum. And this is a bit worrying, isn't it, when you see the President of the United States kind of stamping his feet up and down saying, I don't like these people, they're not saying what I want them to say. Actually, it's really good and it's very healthy to have news outlets that are very critical of a president. I mean, it actually, in a way, Sean Spicer has walked onto the punch here, because he has come out with quite a lot of what you would call fake news, facts that aren't actually facts at all. Earlier in this month, he was talking about the Iranians attacking a U.S. Navy ship. Well, it turned out it wasn't a U.S. Navy ship, and it wasn't the Iranians. Actually, it was the Houthis in Yemen attacking a Saudi ship. And that is an act of war. If it was to have been a U.S. a ship and the Iranians to attack it. So this kind of mistake, massive mistake, it does give you the impression of a kind of selfish president who is people around him and him are making things up, and when they get caught out they have a tantrum like they're having at the moment. I agree. Next week hopefully what we'll see is all these news organizations allowed back, because I know what a lot of these global press organizations are like. Sometimes they do work together, and there are organizations like the Journalists Union, the Editors Unions, which will be asking a lot of questions about this and saying, well, maybe we should just boycott these press conferences until Trump actually starts to act like a proper statesman rather than a spoilt brat.
Okay, well, Brent Podolsky, Trump has basically declared war on some parts of the media. What would this mean for his administration if this continues, and what does it actually mean for those media outlets?
Well, the media outlets are doing great. They're getting more viewers and they're getting more readers, and newspaper subscriptions are up. So it's actually helping the media commercially. I think it's hurting the media by attacking their credibility, and I think it's hurting Donald Trump because his credibility goes down too. I think there will be no choice from the Trump White House but to take the advice of many Republicans and almost all Democrats and people in the media, lighten up and stop these attacks on the media. Nixon learned the hard way what happens when you do that kind of thing. The bigger issue, and this is the really important question, is on the Russia, for example, which is a big source of a lot of these controversies. What meetings did or did not happen between the Trump people and the Russians? I don't know the ultimate answer, but those answers, whatever they are, will come out. And if I were Trump, I would want that out, whatever it is, because otherwise it's going to come out over his objection, and he won't protect himself if it's bad news by attacking the media.
Well, Mr. Podolsky, isn't it true, though, isn't it true, sir, that the mainstream media it sort of picks which stories they really want to concentrate on? Right now, it is this Russian issue, and possibly that they talk together during that transition period. And many would say, actually, maybe it's not a bad thing that the Russians and Americans don't go to war. But we saw, for example, during the run-up to the presidential election, we saw the whole email controversy, for example, about Hillary Clinton, that the controversy itself was concentrated on, but really the media organizations did not dig into actually what the emails were talking about. So don't we have sort of selective analysis and selective news that are covered, perhaps for agenda by the mainstream media, or not?
Oh, no, absolutely. And look, I'm not going to defend everything that the mainstream media does. I've been very critical of it. They tend to like in the media what is shallow, what is superficial. It's not fake news, it's cheap news in many occasions. And what the media does not like generally, any media, corporate or otherwise, they don't like thoughtful, serious discussions of issues. I will say this, though, on this Russia thing, and I'm not saying what the final verdict is. I don't know the facts. Whether Russia affected an American election and spied on America, which they obviously tried to do and did on the spying, is a very big issue, as it is in France, in Germany, in Britain, and in other countries right now, where this is front page news all over the world, the democratic world. These are big issues. The problem with the media is not that they're biased for or against Trump. At times they've been both. It's that they don't want to go in depth to serious issues. They tend to prefer the cheap and the sensational and the quick news cycle stuff where they get something on and then they beat it to death, then they go to something else, and they lack the depth of analysis that some of my media heroes, like Edward R. Murrow, the great CBS correspondent for 30 years, used to do. We need more quality and depth. And that's the problem with the media, that they don't do that enough. I try I do my best, and there are others who do. What Trump is attacking, though, is the reporting of facts and truth because he thinks it hurts them. And then the attacking the patriotism and integrity of journalists, and he's not going to win that fight.
Okay. Well, Tony Gosling, is this all indicative of something much bigger happening in the United States? It appears to be perhaps an overall deterioration of trust, the trust factor by the American people, much of the American system, whether we're talking about politicians, whether we're talking about the media or whatever, because in actuality, whatever he is or not, the American people has elected him as the president.
I think actually it's indicative of something much bigger, which is that the FBI, the CIA, a lot of the what you call permanent government, the people that never get elected, plus the people that own and control the press, has been used to a kind of establishment way of doing things, and Trump is stirring that up. Now, not necessarily in a good way either. I mean, a lot of people had hopes that he was going to drain the swamp. He hasn't done that at all. He's just brought lots of Goldman Sachs and other big corporations in. And I do think he's coming across as quite amateurish. Certainly no John F. Kennedy is Donald Trump. Also, the press, you know, I do agree in some ways, the press is increasingly trying to lead opinion, basically mind control millions of people, and they shouldn't be doing that. They should be reflecting opinion, and they should be doing much more investigative journalism. There's an absolute dearth of it in the West these days, nowhere near as much as there was in the 1980s. The BBC really stopped doing it in the 1990s properly. And also there is an attack on journalists generally, which this is just one part of. I mean, I myself have been excluded from press conferences in the past because I've been very critical of the people I'm trying to interrogate. I mean, we've got at the moment, Der Spiegel has just released in Germany that their security services for the last 20 years have been spying on, putting under surveillance all of the international press in Germany, which is just not acceptable. We are not to be spied on, just like MPs. We're the eyes and ears of the public. And in Britain, we've got an Espionage Act, it looks like, coming along now, which will put whistleblowers and journalists in jail for 14 years. So it's not the Islamic radicals that are taking away our civil liberties. It's our own governments.
All right, and on that note, that brings us to the end of this debate. Thanks so much to my guests for being with me from The Hill, Brent Bodowski, the columnist at The Hill from Washington, D.C., investigative journalist, Mr. Tony Gosling, out of Bristol. And as always, viewers, we appreciate you being with us on another debate. Join us same time, same place tomorrow. Marzia Hashmi signing out for myself and all the crew right here in Tehran.
You guys have been able to keep up with all of this? This is how exhausting things have been just in the last 2 weeks. You got everybody busy fighting with each other over identity politics, which is being totally manipulated from the bottom up and the top down.
There was chaos and confusion at airports today as President Trump's immigration crackdown took effect.
This fire was started. In fact, this young man, you were participating in the fire.
My name's Carter, and I actually kind of started this fire.
This executive order was mean-spirited and un-American.
Donald Trump, suck a dick. Screw our president!
To keep everybody distracted while the actual agenda in the background that we've seen, at least since 9/11, continues on not just at full speed, but kicked into overdrive. We're about to go to war. At least by all accounts of everything that we're seeing right now, this is what they're gearing up towards. And so they got to keep everybody distracted and fighting amongst themselves so they don't see the machinations in the background. So this is just the stuff that's happened just in the last 2 weeks. And I want to put it all together in one place so you can get the full picture of what's actually happening here. As you guys know, Donald Trump and his chief strategist Steve Bannon put out a travel ban to 7 primarily Muslim countries. The media immediately went into overdrive, hyping this Muslim ban, calling it a Muslim ban. It's not a Muslim ban, because if it was a Muslim ban, Trump would have added Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates and Turkey to the list, and he did not. And the media has tried to say, well, maybe it's because Trump has business dealings with Saudi Arabia and Turkey and the United Arab Emirates. But that's not really it, I don't think. And neither is the argument that, well, those are the countries where the terrorists are coming from. Because if it was about where terrorists come from, again, Saudi Arabia would have been on the list, because if you go by the official 9/11 narrative, most of the hijackers came from there. So Saudi Arabia not on the list. But if you look at the countries that are, which is Iraq, Syria, Libya, Iran, Yemen, Sudan, and Somalia, you'll notice something should stand out to you. And it isn't just that those are all countries that Obama has spent the last 8 years invading and bombing, but that those are countries that the U.S. admittedly that the Pentagon had a plan to topple years ago that came out after 9/11. Do you guys remember this statement from General Wesley Clark?
This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran.
Pentagon had a plan. They were going to topple the governments of Iraq, Libya, Lebanon, Syria, Somalia, Sudan, and Iran. The only difference between this list and this map is trade out Lebanon for Yemen. That's about it. It's basically the same exact list. The agenda is continuing. So you had the travel ban, and then right afterwards, Iran announced that they've officially ditched the dollar. They're done. That happened on the 1st. The very next day, you had Donald Trump tweeting that Iran has been formally put on notice for firing a ballistic missile, and that they should have been thankful for the terrible Iran deal that the U.S. made with them. I'm going to get into this in just a second as to why that second statement is verbatim a play out of the Which Path to Persia playbook towards getting America into war with Iran. But first, I just want to point out that Iran fired a non-nuclear missile, which according to the deal, they were allowed to do, test fire those, as long as they were not nuclear. So they actually didn't break the deal. Okay, they didn't do anything that was against the deal that they made. But you had Trump saying that. You also had his national security advisor, Michael Flynn, who Brandon Turbeville of Activist Post refers to as a rabid anti-Iran warmonger, delivering a speech where he says we're putting Iran on notice.
As of today, we are officially putting Iran on notice. Thank you.
And he not only says it's because they fired a ballistic missile, which again isn't true, but also that they were responsible for the attack on ships in the region. And then the same day you have Press Secretary Sean Spicer falsely accusing Iran of attacking a U.S. Navy vessel.
That Iran has violated the joint resolution, that Iran's additional hostile actions that it took against our Navy vessel are ones that we are very clear are not going to sit by and take. John.
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry. Yes. Sorry, thank you. Sorry, yes.
When in reality what actually happened was that Houthi rebels in Yemen attacked a Saudi Arabian ship. Well, now they're trying to say, but Iran is backing the Houthi rebels in Yemen, so Iran actually attacked the ship by proxy. But that's actually not what happened either, because the United Nations just got done putting out a whole report this last weekend about how there is no evidence or proof or anything that Iran is giving weapons or financial backing to these Houthi rebels, and that actually their influence in the region is marginal at best. So that's not even what's going on, but that's the kind of twisting of the narrative that they like to do in order to garner support from the American people for this war. And as Tony Cartalucci of Land Destroyer Report pointed out in this excellent article about how they're edging us closer to war, this whole thing with the Iran deal from when Obama gave it to them to when Trump took it away is all one big play out of the Brookings report, Which Path to Persia, Options for a New American Strategy Towards Iran, that was put out in 2009. Almost verbatim. If you go in and take a look at it, it says, any military operation against Iran will likely be very unpopular around the world and require the proper international context. The best way to minimize international opprobrium and maximize support, however grudging or covert, is to strike only when there's widespread conviction that the Iranians were given but then rejected a superb offer, one so good that only a regime determined to acquire nuclear weapons and require them for the wrong reasons would turn it down. Under those circumstances, the U.S. or Israel could portray its operations as taken in sorrow, not anger, and at least in some of the international community would conclude that the Iranians brought it all on themselves. And that is why you saw Obama's White House promoting support for this nuclear deal and really pushing it in everyone's face. They didn't really want your support, they just wanted your disgust. They actually wanted people to be angry about it. That's why you had that whole video come out with the pallets of cash. They actually wanted Americans to get really angry about the deal while promoting it. It was a psyop. You know, they wanted to put it in your face and make you angry about it so that you would call for it to be pulled, so that here at home, that's what we're getting. But really, internationally, they want it to look like Iran was given this too good to be true, awesome deal, and that they didn't abide by it, which will then garner more sympathy for the US or Israel or both when they attack Iran. That's the whole plot here that is being played, and it's verbatim coming out of this document. So, as Tony Cartalucci points out, and he's spot on, these statements encapsulate a documented conspiracy that was drafted under President Bush, implemented under President Obama, and is finally coming into full fruition under President Trump, once again illustrating the continuity of agenda that transcends party politics, presidencies, and political rhetoric, driven by immense corporate financier special interests, and not the will of the American public. And people ignored largely during the debates when Trump mentioned Iran, but he mentioned Iran quite a bit during the debates.
And you know who's going to be the beneficiary? Iran. Iran, as I said many years ago, Iran is taking over Iraq. The Iran deal and how bad a deal it is for us. It's a one-sided transaction. A terrorist state, really the #1 terrorist state. Iran should write us a letter of thank you. The deal with Iran will lead to nuclear problems. All they have to do is sit back 10 years, and they don't have to do much, and they're going to end up getting nuclear. I met with Bibi Netanyahu the other day. Believe me, he is not a happy camper.
And he also has been on record as saying that he wanted to be the most pro-Israel presidential candidate in American history.
You know, I've known Donald Trump for about 15 years and have worked closely with him. When he became the presumptive nominee, he approached me, and what he said to me is, he said, David, I want to be a very pro-Israel candidate. I want to be the most pro-Israel candidate that this nation has seen.
First of all, there's nobody on this stage that's more pro-Israel than I am.
After this happened and when this stuff started coming out this week, reports also came out that Israel was talking about possibly nominating Trump for a Nobel Peace Prize for how he's trying to bring peace and stability to the Middle East. But anyways, the very next day after Trump is sending out these tweets about putting Iran on notice, then you have Trump slapping fresh sanctions on Iran. Sanctions, by the way, which include at least one company that's actually based in China. So they're not really, it's not just Iran they're messing with. And if you look at the people that Trump has surrounded himself with, all the military, it's basically just one huge sign that they're building up towards this war. People like appointing John Kelly to lead Homeland Security. This guy, my gosh, seriously, makes Janet Napolitano look good. By comparison, much scarier. Dude, this guy, he ran the United States Southern Command. He was in charge of Guantanamo Bay. He is an avid pro-torture guy who has been quoted as saying, if you think this war against our way of life is over because of some self-appointed opinion makers and chattering class that are growing war-weary because they want to be out of Iraq and Afghanistan, you're mistaken. This enemy is dedicated to our destruction. He will fight us for generations, and the conflict will move through various phases, as it has since 9/11. He also commanded troops during the invasion and occupation of Iraq, which led up to the deaths of, 1 million civilians. And when he was interviewed about that, he actually told a reporter, Baghdad ain't shit. So that's the guy right there, the guy who they say Kelly is, to use the phrase of Smedley Butler, a high-class muscle man for big business, Wall Street, and the bankers, which I guess makes sense since Trump has filled his cabinet with bankers, Goldman Sachs, even got House of Rothschild in there. So totally makes sense to put a guy like this in charge, but geez, that's our Homeland Security Secretary. So yeah, not only that, but Kurt Nimmo reported on the fact that on her first day on the job, his new UN ambassador, Nikki Haley, used her inaugural speech at the UN to condemn who? Yeah, that's right, Russia.
The United States is determined to push for action. There is no time to waste. I consider it unfortunate that the occasion of my first appearance here is one in which I must condemn the aggressive actions of Russia. It is unfortunate because
she's reading a script, and that is the part that she is supposed to play, and that is what she has been told to do. And she just wanted to hit that point home a little further by sending out this portion of her speech to make sure, just in case Russia didn't see that speech or didn't know about that speech, she wanted to make sure that they knew that she's condemning Russia. And she also sent out this picture of her face. I guess that's her "I'm condemning Russia" face. I don't know.
Russia is going to continue to be at the forefront of a lot of issues that we have to deal with.
So all of this has happened in just the span of a couple of weeks. A couple weeks is all it has been. I really want to get to the heart of the matter and what's really going on with how things have been manipulated to this point. You need to go read up on Steve Bannon's opinions of things and what he thinks. And I'm not talking about identity politics, race baiting, where they try to make him out to be racist or whatever. I don't know about any of that, and that is not the point here. The point here is his obsession with this book, and they mention it in here. It's a book he actually ended up making a documentary on called The Fourth Turning. And it has to do with this theory that American history can be described in these four-phase cycles that are repeated again and again. And this article over at Business Insider sums it up pretty well. Steve Bannon's obsession with a dark theory of history should be worrisome. He talks about how there are these 80 to 100-year cycles. When they come to an end, a cataclysmic event destroys the old order and brings in a new one. So order out of chaos, new world order. This era of change is known as the Fourth Turning, and Bannon believes we're in the midst of that now, and that's what his entire documentary here was about, where he believes the catalyst was actually the 2008 collapse, and now we're going to have this war that they're obviously bringing about as fast as they possibly can. It says, according to the book, the last two fourth turnings that America experienced were the Civil War and the Reconstruction, and then the Great Depression and World War II, and before that it was the Revolutionary War. All of these were marked periods of dread and decay in which the American people were forced to unite to rebuild a new future, but only after a massive conflict in which many lives were lost. It all starts with a catalyst event, a period of regeneracy. There's a defining climax in which a war for the old order is fought, and finally there's a resolution in which the new world order is established. That is the whole thing. It's bringing chaos to create order. But there's two things about that that are never taken into consideration when they talk about this stuff. The first one is the fact that all of those events, the Civil War, the Great Depression, and especially World War II, were manipulated events. They weren't organic events that just had to happen because there's this 80-year cycle and that's just how it is. All of those events were manipulated, okay? And the second point I want to make is that they were manipulated, and was the order that came out of any of those better? Did it make things better? Did things get better? No, okay? They always centralize power, and they always push us towards whatever the new future is. And the new future, you guys, is Agenda 2030. And we have talked about the United Nations agendas at length, but part of Trump's travel ban, part of his executive order, he even mentions one of the things he's fast-tracking is biometric entry and exit at airports. Biometrics in the airports, guys. That's not going to just be for immigrants and foreign visitors to the country. That's going to be for everyone. They're going to be facially recognizing, iris scanning, and fingerprinting everyone. If you want to leave this country, you're going to have to do that. And they've put that in place, and they've told Mr. Warmonger over there at the DHS that they want to fast-track that biometric entry-exit system for all people. It's not written to just say that's just for immigrants. That's for everybody, and that's coming. This whole cashless grid and everything else, all of that stuff is coming, but to get us there, they need some kind of huge catalyst for the paradigm shift to get us into the system they want us to be on. Bannon also came out, by the way, and said that in the next 10 years, we're going to be at war with China, no doubt. That's a quote. He also said that there's going to be another really large war in the Middle East. What do you think he's talking about? He's talking about Iran. There will be a war in the South China Sea. There's no doubt about that. And at the same time, U.S. will be in another major war in the Middle East because he knows what's up. Trump is he's just the tool that they're using to get this agenda rammed through. This has nothing to do with Trump. People have so bought into the cult of personality, they're going blind to what's actually happening. I mean, do I think it's good that he's getting rid of Obamacare and the TPP, I absolutely think that's great. Does that mean I'm going to stand around and cheerlead as he leads us into the next gigantic war? No, absolutely not. And I think it's really sad that there's a large portion of the liberty movement that has sold itself out and gone back on its own values doing that. And when I say Trump is a tool, I literally mean a tool. Look at this interview that Steve Bannon gave with Vanity Fair. Scroll all the way down. They actually have a pull quote here that's, I think, sums it up for you. He said, "Trump is a blunt instrument for us. I don't know whether he really gets it or not." That's all you need to know. Trump is their instrument to bring about what Bannon believes is the fourth turning. And while I appreciate that he thinks he's going to institute a new world order that's going to be the good new world order, there's a deep state that's behind all of this that is not going to allow things to be the way that these people think that all of these people are different levels of tools for this agenda that's being pushed. It's really all it is. I always wondered during the election about Hillary because she had to know how hated, loathed, and unpopular she was. She was probably the most unpopular presidential candidate in American history, hands down, right? And she didn't even really campaign, and she did things during the campaign that didn't really make any sense, too. Even for someone who maybe just has been told they're gonna win, or they've got it in the bag, still she wouldn't say and do some of the things that she did. This is all a big show. Why? Because she was the villain, you guys. This is how it works. You can't have a hero with hero worship and building up the hero unless you've got a really great villain. And that's who Hillary Clinton was. She was the villain in the stage play that was our last election. All they're doing here is continuing the same agenda that they have been on. It was started under Bush, it was continued under Obama, and now it's being exponentially ramped up under Trump. I just hope that people start to look at this and see all of it for what it really is. This is what's happening. They are taking us to war. And people are going to be too blinded by their own infighting or alternately cult of personality hero worship to see it.
Iran now starting massive war drills in the wake of the Trump election.
Go back to Iran. You said they will do what I tell them. How do you make them do what you say? They will know I'm not playing games.
Military action against Iran? Are you going to do something to that country?
Well, I would want to help Saudi Arabia. I would want to protect Saudi Arabia, but Saudi Arabia is going to have to help us. But they were making $1 billion a day.
But you got to answer my question. Would you take action against Iran militarily if you're president?
Depending on what the deal is, I would have to do that. I would defend certain groups of people over there.
You tell the Middle East we're not using a nuclear weapon.
I would never say that. I would never take any of my cards off the table.
How about Europe? We won't use it in Europe.
I'm not going to take it off the table.
You might.
3 times he asked about the use of nuclear weapons. 3 times he asked, at one point, if we have them, why can't we use them?
Trump asked 3 times.
3 times in an hour briefing, why can't we use nuclear weapons?
Donald Trump is sounding warnings about the risk of a 9/11 style attack.
Bad things will happen. A lot of bad things will happen. There will be attacks that you wouldn't believe. There will be attacks by the people that are right now coming into our country, because I have no doubt.
A federal judge has put a temporary halt on the president's travel ban nationwide.
In fact, we call ourselves internally the Fight Club.
My first appearance here is one in which I must condemn the aggressive actions of Russia.
We're going to have to send China a clear signal that first, the island building stops, and second, your access to those islands is also not going to be allowed.
The Chinese newspaper says, quote, unless Washington plans to wage a large-scale war in the South China Sea, trying to block China's access to the islands would be, quote, foolish.
In fact, we call ourselves internally the Fight Club. The Fight Club
is your greatest gift to us. Teach us to respect life from its natural beginning to its natural end. Help us to reach out to the marginalized in our society from its natural beginning to its natural end. Help us to reach out to the marginalized.
President Trump has invited Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to Washington next month. The two did have a phone conversation yesterday, which was described as very warm.
Donald Trump is going to war for Israel. Never before has a president been so incredibly pro-Israel.
And we will go and confront Russia. What, over Syria? We're going to start World War III, right? Give me a break.
Donald Trump is expected to meet the Queen when he visits the UK later this year. The US President is scheduled to meet with Theresa May on a working visit on July 13, rather than a state visit, which would have meant that Trump would have been hosted by the Queen. Yet reports suggest that he is expected to meet Her Majesty at either Balmoral or Windsor. Today, protesters vowed to disrupt Trump's state visit with mass protests. The US President will come to the UK for talks with Theresa May after traveling to Europe for a NATO summit. The confirmation of the working trip, which will not have all the pomp and ceremony of a state visit, comes after months of difficult wrangling between the White House and Downing Street over the plans. But it sparked immediate threats of protest as activists said they would take to the streets to vent their fury at his visit. Jeremy Corbyn-backing activist and commentator Owen Jones took to Facebook to urge Britons to join mass demonstrations against the visit. Writing on the Protest Trump's Visit Facebook group, which has over 100,000 people interested in it, he wrote, "It's official, Donald Trump is visiting the UK on July 13th. Everyone out on the streets. Invite everyone you know to this event." Police have been bracing themselves for what could be the biggest protests the country has seen. And the Lib Dems vowed to join the demonstrations, with their deputy party leader Joe Swinson saying, "The government has made the right decision to cancel Trump's state visit, but this scaled-down trip must not be met with scaled-down protests." Protesting against a man with dangerous, misogynistic, and racist views is our responsibility. It is our opportunity to stand in solidarity with all the people he has abused and denigrated. When he comes to the UK, the Liberal Democrats will be front and centre of the protests. Announcing the visit today, the PM's spokesman said this evening, the President of the United States will visit the UK on July 13th. He will hold bilateral talks with the Prime Minister during his visit. Further details will be set out in due course. Ministers will be hoping that the fact Mr. Trump is coming on Friday 13th is not an unlucky omen. Boris Johnson tweeted his excitement at the visit, writing, "Fantastic news that President Donald Trump will at last come to Britain on July 13th. Looking forward to seeing our closest ally and friend on the greatest visit ever." The details of the itinerary for the trip have yet to be released. There has been speculation that the talks with Ms. May will take place at her Chequers country retreat rather than Downing Street. Mr. Trump could also meet the Queen or other senior members of the royal family, even though it is not a state visit. Officials will be keen to roll out the red carpet while also minimizing the prospect of protests. The president is expected to attend the NATO summit in Brussels on July 11 and 12 and travel on to the UK afterwards. Some Tory MPs were jubilant at the news. Backbencher Nigel Evans told Mail Online, "I am really pleased he is coming, particularly so soon after Macron's red carpet treatment in Washington. We should never take the special relationship for granted. We know the left are going to be fuming that he is coming to the UK. It is pathetic. The fact is that these are the same people who cheered Obama when he said before the EU referendum that we would be at the back of the queue for a trade deal. Trump is a man who loves the UK." In a sign of the stormy reception Mr. Trump could face, Amnesty International spokeswoman Kate Allen said, "When Donald Trump arrives on these shores, we and thousands of our supporters will very definitely be making our voices heard. In the 15 months of his presidency, we've seen a deeply disturbing human rights rollback, including the discriminatory travel ban, his reckless announcement on Jerusalem, and harmful policies on refugees, women's rights, and climate change." Mr. Trump's visit to Britain, which was first mooted when he took office in January last year, has suffered repeated cancellations and delays. He was due to come to the UK in February to open the new US Embassy in London. But the White House went cold on the idea and cancelled at the last moment. The Prime Minister was among the first foreign leaders to visit the White House. However, since then, the relationship between the leaders has suffered turbulent moments. They clashed last year over Mr. Trump's tweets sharing anti-Muslim propaganda from a far-right group called Britain First. The president also had a run-in with London Mayor Sadiq Khan over the terror threat to the capital. The new dates for a so-called working visit will be a boost to Ms. May and a sign that relations between Downing Street and the White House have improved. The two leaders spoke repeatedly and at length earlier this month as they discussed their response to the chemical weapons attacks on Douma in Syria. British fighter jets joined the US and France in carrying out bombing raids on regime military targets. There is still no fixed date for an official state visit, which was offered by Ms. May when she visited Washington in January last year. Mr. Trump has developed close ties with Emmanuel Macron of France. He was invited to be guest of honor at the Bastille Day celebrations last year, when his 24-hour visit was topped off with a military parade. He and his wife Melania dined with the French president and his wife Brigitte at the Eiffel Tower. UK diplomats have become concerned about the French stealing a march on relations with the US. This week Mr. Trump hosted President Macron, the first state visit by a foreign leader since he entered the White House. Ministers have discussed plans for Mr. Trump to meet the Queen at Balmoral Castle before visiting one of his two golf courses in Aberdeenshire and Ayrshire. Officials believe using the royal family's remote estate would prevent embarrassing scenes where he is confronted by thousands of demonstrators. Mr. Trump is said to have expressed an interest in playing a round of golf at the Queen's 9-hole course at the Aberdeenshire Castle. The president had been due to open the new £1 billion US embassy at 9 Elms in South London in February. He said he had dropped the visit because the old embassy in Mayfair had been sold on the cheap. Jeremy Corbyn has said Mr. Trump should not be invited and urged his followers to turn out in force if the US president visited the UK to send him a clear message. More than 1 million people signed a petition last year calling for the state visit to be cancelled. Mail Online has contacted Buckingham Palace for comment.
Who's Yanni? We tortured some folks.
Nazi Germany. Very nice. Getting a good picture, everybody, so we look nice and handsome.
Beautiful.
I think he liked me, and I like him, and I understand the past, and nobody has to tell me he's a rough guy. He has to be a rough guy, or he has been a rough person, but we got along very well. He's smart, loves his people, he loves his country, he wants a lot of good things, and that's why he's doing this.
But he's starved them, he's been brutal to them, he still loves his people?
Look, he's doing what he's seen done. I mean, if you look at it, but I really have to go by today and by yesterday and by a couple of weeks ago, because that's really when this whole thing started.
Because this is Voice America, it will be heard in North Korea by the citizens of DPRK of North Korea. What do you want to say directly to the citizens of North Korea?
Well, I think you have somebody that has a great feeling for them. He wants to do right by them, and we got along really well. We had a great chemistry. You understand how I feel about chemistry. It's very important. I mean, I know people where there is no chemistry. No matter what you do, just don't have it. We had it right from the beginning. I talked about that, and I think great things are going to happen for North Korea.
Are we close to seeing Mr. Kim here at the White House?
Could happen. I mean,
they talked about that yesterday.
I think it's something that could happen. Yeah. Hey, he's the head of a country, and I mean, he is the strong head. Don't let anyone think anything different. Right. He speaks, and his people sit up at attention. I want my people to do the same.
Well,
what could happen? What could take place? As an example, they have great beaches. You see that whenever they're exploding their cannons into the ocean, right? I said, boy, look at that beach. Wouldn't that make a great condo behind? And I explained, I said, instead of doing that, you could have the best hotels in the world right there. Think of it from a real estate perspective. You have South Korea, you have China, and they own the land in the middle. How bad is that, right? It's great. But I told them, I said, you may not want to do what's there. You may want to do a smaller version of it, or, and that could be. Although I tell you what, he looked at that tape, he looked at that iPad, and I'm telling you, they really enjoyed it, I believe. Okay? Thank you, everybody. What's happened over the last 4 years is disgusting, and I just think there's a tremendous lack of spirit, and I think the spirit has to be brought back.
You have a vice presidential candidate in mind?
Well, I really haven't gotten quite there yet.
It's
I guess
it's just
Oprah. I love Oprah. Oprah would always be my first choice.
Oprah.
Oprah, your competitor, right?
Oprah's a competitor.
You know what?
No
I'll tell you, she's really a great woman, though. She is a terrific woman. She's somebody that's very special. I have not even thought about it. I guess we'll see. We'll see. Maybe that's part of the whole process.
Would she be someone, I mean, kidding aside, that you might think
if
about?
she'd do it, she'd be fantastic. I mean, she's popular, she's brilliant, she's a wonderful woman. I mean, if she'd ever do it, I don't know that she'd ever do it. She's got,
You'd ask her.
She'd be sort of like me. I mean, I have a lot of things going. She's got a lot of things going.
What a ticket
in terms
that would
of, that would be a pretty good ticket, but she's a very exceptional woman.
What makes a good president?
Well, I think the leadership qualities.
You know, Ivanka, that's a beautiful photo of you and your child, but let me just say, one mother to another, do something about your dad's immigration practices, you feckless cunt. He listens to you. Put on something tight and low cut and tell your father to fucking stop it. Tell him it was an Obama thing and see how it goes, okay?
Who's Yanny?
Nazi Germany.